Today we're talking about Terminator Zero, the new entry in the Terminator franchise on Netflix and the first animated Terminator entry. We're going to give our overall thoughts and then we'll go into a full recap and discussion of the entire first season. I'm Gil, by the way, the voice and face of OneTake, and next to me is my brother Daniel. Say hello.
Hello.
Daniel, I thought we could start with our bona fides. Let's talk about our experience with the Terminator franchise growing up. So people know, we know what we're talking about. It's not like we just heard about this. What's this Terminator thing? AI? Robots? So, I don't know if you remember this, but I remember growing up with Terminator 2. This was during a phase where our dad kind of discovered the record functionality on the VCR. So he just started recording. Anytime WB, they would do these Sunday afternoon movies. He recorded Terminator 2 off that. And I watched that tape over and over as a kid, which I feel like now would be unheard of, to just watch a movie that's a sequel and have no interest in being like, until years later saying, wait a minute, the 2 in this title, that must mean, you don't think, is a Terminator 1 out there somewhere? And also, this was the WB afternoon movie, so this was edited for television. So it wasn't until years later that I finally saw the true original cut of Terminator 2. And then I went back, of course, and saw Terminator 1, which I loved. It had a little bit more of a horror vibe, but still very much has the patented James Cameron heart. And I was looking forward to Terminator 3 so bad. When I first got on the internet and discovered IMDb and discovered other movie news websites, I found out they're working on a third one. It went in and out of development for years, but I was so looking forward to it. And then when I finally saw it at age 13, I wouldn't say I was crushed. I was more confused. I was like, I don't get it. It was fine, but it wasn't as good as the second one. And then my dad was like, I mean, they made that movie 20 years ago, Gil. What were you expecting? I guess at that point, it would have only been like 10 years ago at that point. That was one of my first introductions to the idea that just because a movie is a sequel, it doesn't mean it will be of equal quality. And if I didn't get that lesson, it will be hammered into my head over and over by many other movies, some of which are also in this franchise. Because then there was Terminator Salvation, Terminator Genesis, and even recently, Terminator Dark Fate. So by now, I've learned to not expect very much of the Terminator franchise. And then you hear about an anime. And the medium of live action has been ruined for me. I know to expect that sequels aren't going to be great. But I've only explored anime a little bit, so I still have the magic of, it'll definitely be good. And then you get Mattson Tomlin involved, who's running the show. He worked on The Batman, which I liked. There were some things I didn't like, but I can just assume there were a lot of people who worked on that movie. He's the guy who was in charge of all the aspects I liked, let's assume. So I was really looking forward to the anime. We finally saw it. Before we go into our thoughts, Daniel, anything to add from...
Well, do you remember, I actually have a very unique bona fide with Terminator that I completely forgot about until you were just reminiscing. I got in trouble for liking Terminator so much. Do you remember this?
What? No.
So we used to go...
Now I think I remember, yeah.
We used to go to an after-school program. And I was very young because first I saw Terminator 2 when I was like 6 or something. Like I was really, really young. And I would not stop repeating the lines from the movie. I kept going, "Hasta la vista, baby. Come with me if you want to live." And
Eat
I
my
would
shorts. That was in the movie.
I would not shut up. And they made me leave the program one day because I wouldn't stop.
So even back then, you were like this.
Hasta la vista, baby. One other thing though, this also brought me back to when I was that young, and you would be telling us about like Terminator 3's coming up, like all this stuff. I remembered, like, to me, just because you read IMDb, it felt like you had like a secret like source. You had like a link to the Hollywood industry. Like you somehow knew what was going on. And I would tell my friends at school like what movies are coming out like soon, and they were blown away too. Like they didn't understand like how I knew these things.
Yeah, I remember going through the same thing where I think I told you about this recently, but my first introduction to the world of film is I was at summer camp. and they wheeled in that CRT TV and they put on a VHS, and it was one of the Indiana Jones movies. And then one of the camp counselors standing next to me, he goes, they're making a fourth one. And I was like, how does he know that? Like, what's his inside line to Hollywood? Yeah, and then I went on Google, or probably at the time it would have been Yahoo or Ask Jeeves, and I was like, Indiana Jones 4. And that's when I found all these websites. Ain'titcool.com. There's a throwback. Well, let's go into our overall thoughts then. So, Terminator Zero, the anime came out on August 29th, Judgment Day. I was a little disappointed they released it at midnight Pacific, which would make, midnight Pacific, which makes it 3 a.m. Eastern. But they could have released it at the actual time when Skynet gained sentience. I forget what time it is. This is terrible. Our bona fides are all gone. I want to say 2:17 a.m. or possibly 1:17.
Well, wait, and spoilers for the show, right?
Yeah, okay, so we're going to spoil the whole show starting now.
All right, I mean, technically, in this show, Judgment Day ends up not really happening at that time anyway.
Tell me you didn't understand the show without telling me you didn't understand the show. Well, he's jumping ahead. Judgment Day does happen, except for Japan. You actually see the entire Earth get blanketed in nuclear explosions, except Japan.
Wait, are you serious?
Yeah.
No. I thought they were blowing up in the atmosphere. And they're blowing up in the atmosphere above Japan, too. Okay, well, so we just cut away for a bit because I was confused. But the show is confusing. Apparently, what you were saying is right, which is that everybody got killed except for the people in Tokyo. Kokoro only protected the people in Tokyo. But like they showed the nuclear bombs exploding in the atmosphere. So I thought that's what was going on. But then even when they showed mushroom clouds like on the Earth and people dying, I thought those were like dreams of Judgment Day and stuff again, because they were kind of showing those a bunch throughout the show. So okay, but in general, this brings up one general issue I had with the show, which was it was very confusing. A lot of stuff did not really make sense to me. So we'll talk it through. But I enjoyed it. Like I did like it. That being said, the bar is pretty low for like animated content. Like so much of the dialogue, if it was spoken by real people, would have been so extremely cringy. But like it's a cartoon, so like it's okay.
I feel like right off the bat, you're trying to turn everybody listening to this against you. Because I think people will say, well, maybe you've lowered the bar for anime or animated shows, but I will say I've watched a lot of anime. I've watched a lot of animated shows, and so I've seen a lot of really bad ones. But if your only exposure is the shows that I've recommended you, then, well, I guess that would raise your bar. Well, it doesn't matter.
I know there's a lot of anime that has great dialogue, but in general, like because it's animated, I will just accept worse dialogue.
Yeah, I find I have the same problem when I read a comic book. Yeah, I will just, whatever the dialogue is, it'll just be, I just accept it. Maybe because I'm not reading it out loud in my head, I'm just looking at the words and absorbing the story. But I do find that I lower the bar. But I will say, I generally agree with you on this show. I mean, I think it's easy to say this was the best Terminator show or movie since Terminator 2. It is but like you said, that is a very low bar. And I also have to caveat that I haven't watched Sarah Connor Chronicles since it aired. That was the TV show, Daniel, on Fox that basically spun directly out of Terminator 2. And I know people have a lot of fond memories of that show. Pretty much anytime I do a Terminator video, I'll get a bunch of comments where people want me to go talk about Sarah Connor Chronicles. So for all I know, I'll go back and rewatch that and be blown away. This is way better than I remembered. And what I remember is it was fine. It was okay. So putting that aside, this was the first thing since Terminator 2 where I liked it through and through. I have some issues with it, but overall, I thought it was good. It reminded me of The Batman to some degree. So like I mentioned before, that's a movie that Mattson Tomlin, who runs this show, worked on. And I think the reason it reminded me of The Batman is what that movie did best is the overall tone, the vibe, and the aesthetic. And so sometimes on this show, when the dialogue gets a little bit iffy, it's like close enough that the music and the style gets it over the line to sell to me what's happening. And it'll get me to the emotional place I'm supposed to be at, almost despite some of the storytelling and especially some of the dialogue. I would say secondary to that, there are some cool and interesting ideas, especially when it comes to AI, when it comes to time travel. This movie explores the time travel aspect more than the first two movies. And it adds a little more nuance to humanity versus Skynet. I would say sometimes, I'd say for the most part, not very successfully, but at least tries to take a couple steps in that direction, which is something James Cameron has talked about wanting to do, especially in his upcoming Terminator project that he's vaguely hinted at, but hasn't officially announced anything. And then some of the issues we've already talked about, but a couple more. I found the Terminator's strength and ability to be inconsistent. Like it'll grab somebody, and I'm like, should he not just pulverize their bones right now?
Okay. Even the very first scene, right? They're trying to show us how big a threat the Terminator is. It killed like this huge group of people, whatever. Literally, it might even be the first shot. The Terminator is walking, and it steps on the head of somebody, like a dead person's head, and the head doesn't get crushed.
Like, which I guess is them, maybe that's them telling you, like, that is the strength level of this particular Terminator. As you're used to, what we've seen is in the movies, the Terminator foot steps on a skull and it like explodes.
Yeah.
But I guess a living skull with a brain inside is stronger. Well, it's not living, but recently decapitated.
But at the same time, this Terminator is going to survive, insane things. So, it's made of metal. I guess similarly in that, maybe that's what they're trying to show us, because in that same scene, the Terminator hangs from that woman's leg while she's hanging from a rope. And an adamantium robot, whatever, metal robot thing is gonna would tear her leg out of its socket.
Yeah. So I will say, they were weaker than I expected overall, which is okay, right? If that's the direction they decide to go. But it wasn't just that. It also just felt inconsistent, which is a bigger problem, which we'll get to the details of that. Though I will say of the action, I felt like it was generally pretty restrained. Like it's tempting with an animated show, especially, to go really over the top.
Yeah.
And at least the first two Terminator movies, I would not call them over the top. Like it feels like everything's got weight to it. It's not all this crazy CGI, except for the T-1000 himself in Terminator 2, of course. And when there is CGI, you don't feel it. It never devolves into a cartoon battle. It was also
Was there
90s.
A lot of CGI in this show?
Well, you could point out there are moments where it gets kind of 3D. And it looks less 2D hand-drawn. But I think it did that well. There are some shows that do it too much, or some shows that do that entirely for anime. But here, I thought they picked the right moments for it.
I did want to say, I agreed with you, though, about even if I didn't like the dialogue at times, like the whole vibe was right. It is just like the Batman, where I really did just enjoy being in that world. And the animation was really cool. Like all the conversations with Kokoro, like I liked all those cool like illustrations in that room and stuff. Like just everything, like the vibe was right. It was awesome.
Yeah, that points to, so Kokoro, a very interesting part of the show. This is where they're trying to add some nuance. This is a good AI, or is she good, right? This is an AI that at least was created with the intent of helping humanity, which I guess was the same with Skynet. It's a different AI. Let's go with that.
The distinction was it's an AI with free will.
Right, exactly.
And it can choose to be good.
Yeah, which we'll get into that too. But yeah, some of the conversations with Kokoro feel a little bit like they were written by a moody teen.
Yeah, okay. We'll get to that. A lot of complaints about that. That was probably my biggest frustration with the show.
Yeah, I think anytime you and I are referencing dialogue that we weren't super happy with, that's probably what we're referring to. But even then, it's like the vibe gets you there. It's like you take what they're talking about, and if you take it as shorthand for a more nuanced, like actually interesting conversation, so in your mind you kind of fill in the blanks, and then you get the music and the visuals, and you're like, okay, this is cool.
You really needed to get, I don't know why I think about him, but like an Alex Garland, like Devs, like the quality of like sci-fi philosophy discussion in a show like Devs, like you kind of needed that in the room with Kokoro instead of like angsty dumb teenager who read like, I don't know, some like Nyla stuff.
Why even save humanity?
Yeah,
I don't know, Kokoro.
Yeah, can you name a single good thing about humanity? And like
no, he can't.
And Kokoro's like, humanity is irredeemable, evil, all these things. And then he goes, look, I can't argue with anything you just said. I agree with you. And what I don't get is like, because I feel like you're supposed to sympathize with him. Like you're you're supposed to be like, yeah, like, man, like I feel the same way. And it's like, what are you talking about?
And if you feel that way, like if that's already the way you think, I don't think this show's going to change your mind. Like, this was the thing.
Well, that was the other thing about like the plot that was confusing to me, which is the kids are supposed to demonstrate that humanity's worth saving.
Yeah.
But that was very unclear. Like,
Yeah,
there's a way to do that.
Yeah, speaking of sympathize, I feel I didn't sympathize enough when you said the show is confusing. Like, even when Judgment Day happened and all the bombs went off, I will admit that I was a little confused for a moment. Because like you said, we've seen a lot of dreams in the flash forwards and Malcolm's imagination, which later we find out are memories. So I saw the explosion, but then he's like, Kokoro, were you able to stop it? She's like, for now. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, it's never actually said out loud. The entire Earth was just destroyed except for Japan. And I know we saw it. Like, yes, I saw the Earth exploding. But again, I didn't know if that was a what if. And then in the next episode, they kind of pull it back. Rewatching it, I see specifically Japan is actually spared. Everything else is blown up.
And I don't know how the final cut of this podcast is going to show this. So I'll just say again, like, I didn't realize that Judgment Day happened watching this show. We had to cut away for Gil to explain it to me because I thought Kokoro did prevent it. Like, I didn't realize the nukes killed everybody on the planet except Tokyo. So for that reason, like, Judgment Day was extremely anticlimactic. Like, that was one thing I noticed. Even when I thought it didn't happen, it was just anticlimactic. Like, like it was crazy. Right, so, like, it's Judgment Day.
Yeah, I'll say I actually enjoyed the way Judgment Day was done. And even when I got confused momentarily, it was at the beginning of episode 5. But at the end of episode 4, when it actually happened, I thought it was done pretty well. It reminded me a lot of the ending to Terminator 3, where it's done in this very melancholy way. It isn't like, bum, 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 like, it's happening. It was very like, oh man, it's inevitable. We can't stop it. It was a similar vibe, but we got to soak in it a little bit longer.
It is the same thing though, where it's like some of the specifics I didn't like because I did get like a little lost in it, but the vibe was cool. And also when Kokoro like takes over with the robots killing everybody and then saying like, you are now under my protection, like all that stuff I thought was really cool. Like, I really love that.
Yeah. Well, let's go into the recap.
Let's do it.
Somehow I'm going to recap 8 episodes right now. Let's do this. Well, we start out the first episode in the future. A Terminator has slaughtered a bunch of resistance fighters, but one girl, Aiko, she was able to escape with the thing they came here for, some vital data that they need. This already touches on a lot of what we talked about, visually very cool, but specifically I'll call out that they harken back to the horror vibe of the first Terminator, where you get this kind of uncanny valley effect, where the Terminator always has these big wide eyes. My favorite is anytime they just open their mouth, like,
yeah.
Especially when you hear he opens his mouth and there's like a dial-up modem sound we'll get to a little bit later. But I thought I was very worried right at the beginning of this episode because you have a Terminator with a machine gun and this woman is right in front of him and it does that thing where he's just shooting. All of his bullets are landing right behind her while she's running. It's like if you lift it 1 inch, she's pulverized.
And it's a robot, right? So it should be calculating like the trajectory.
Yeah, and it's also like it wasn't that she was one of the few survivors. She was the only survivor. Like, she's so good that everyone else, and it wasn't like 5 other people. It looks like it was dozens of other people. Everyone got slaughtered. And so I was like, this could not be more of an on the nose. Look how badass she is. And at the cost, now this Terminator is so weak and incapable, he can't hit a target right in front of him. So I was a little worried at the start. It just makes the action and everything feel a little bit less grounded. But I was into it visually, and by the end of the first episode, it wins me over.
The issue with that scene for me was, like, you see all these dead bodies. So the point of this scene could be, oh my God, look at the threat of the Terminator. But it doesn't feel that way because, like, I don't know, she kind of beats the Terminator And like I guess she does like some heroic things and stuff, but didn't seem that hard. Like
Yeah.
whereas later in the show when they show the main guy,
Malcolm.
Malcolm, when they show Malcolm as a kid fighting Terminators, they made that look really hard. Like all the kids work together and they set a trap for the Terminator. Like I thought that was cool. Almost something like that would have been a cooler intro scene. The other thing too is like I don't know the post-apocalyptic world is so cool. I would have almost like seeing more of that world building at the start. Like maybe show us like I don't know, the base of the rebels, like the rebel humans, and them going out into this battle. Like, I don't know, that would have been a more exciting hook to me. Then I was like a little bored during this like scene. It just didn't set the stage right, I felt.
Yeah, in general, I felt like it would have been cool to see more of the future world. Actually, I kind of felt that way about everything. Almost everything in this show, I feel like would have worked better if they had more time to develop the characters. But like later in the episode, when Aiko gets back to the little resistance camp, and like, did anybody else survive? And then she puts her hand on his shoulder, shakes her head no, and he starts sobbing. And I'm like, that's a story beat we've seen so many times before, where one person or a couple people come back from the battle, and people see just how many died. We've seen that beat so many times before. It's not going to automatically land. You have to build up to it. We have to have some connection to these people. And I felt that way about a lot of the stuff. But after that little introduction, we go back to the past. And that future, by the way, was 2022. Then we go back to 1997. That's where the bulk of the show takes place. Malcolm Lee, a scientist, wakes up from nightmares of the coming Judgment Day. Very Sarah Connor-esque. We find out that he has 3 kids. There's Kenta, the oldest. He's a boy who loves technology, loves ripping it apart, building stuff. He's like, where's my blender? I needed it for parts. He's got a younger brother, Hiro, and a younger sister, Rika. Their mother passed away. We later learn why. So Malcolm, single father, always at work. The kids are angry at him, but he's doing what he has to try and prevent or at least soften the blow of the coming Judgment Day. And they have a housekeeper, Misaki, who we'll meet momentarily. But I'll say a couple things. I think a lot of this is shorthand. Like he is the iconic father who's away from home too much. But like I said, tone. I love the music on the show. There's kind of a repeating song that plays, which I can't play for you, but if you watch the show, you'll recognize it. That has a very melancholy feel to it. The closed captions call it tranquil. It plays throughout the series. It'll show up every couple of episodes, and I think the show has a very the end is nigh vibe. You feel like Judgment Day is right around the corner. And in episode 2, I think someone makes a comment about it's August 29th, and I'm like, whoa, okay, so it's like hours away at this point, and I think you really feel that. There is a voiceover where Malcolm is like, the nightmare grows more vivid each night. Time is running out. Soon my nightmare will be real. Something's coming. I know it's true. It's just very, pretty corny. But if you listen to the Japanese audio, it just isn't there. You just have a lot of shots and you're like, why is it so quiet? And you have the subtitles on, and I'm like, wait, it's saying words there, but I'm not hearing anything. So actually, originally I was watching this with the Japanese audio because it says original. So I'm like, oh, that's the correct audio. But I think they might have exported it with a track on mute or something, because a few times there'll be someone off camera and I see a subtitle, but I don't hear anything. So I switched to the English. But we meet Misaki, the housekeeper, doing some shopping, buys the kids a little robot cat named Koneko. And we see that the stores are starting to employ some primitive humanoid robots with these big box heads that just spin around for some reason, which I found so creepy every time we see it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Go ahead.
Well, no, it was very ominous when she thinks she's like trying to talk to a human, right? Like who's crouching down, and then it turns around and it's the first time we see a robot. Like it felt very ominous, given obviously Judgment Day around the corner.
That is when so at first I was skeptical of the show. I was a little worried. That was the moment where I was like, I'm on board. Because yeah, you see him stocking shelves, his back is to her. For some reason, he's ignoring her. And then she goes around the corner and you see he's got a toaster for a head.
Did you catch that, by the way?
What?
Why he ignores her?
I don't. Oh!
Because she's a robot. I only
Yeah,
I just realized that this morning.
that's yeah. When you so later we'll find out that Misaki is actually a robot, and there were a few hints early on. That was one of them I didn't catch. But then also when Hiro asks about the fishing village where she grew up, you see she freezes up. The first time I watched this, I figured she must have some horrible memories from there, and it's like triggering PTSD. But in truth, she doesn't remember it. She doesn't actually have a past. But yeah, that moment was so unsettling, and it's the moment where I started to think this show's got potential. It's also interesting because obviously in Terminator 1 and 2, the world looked a lot like our world. There was it felt like the future was this far off thing, and we didn't see any early indications of them being ahead of us technology wise. So these humanoid robots did not exist, and that was the first time I started to wonder: are we in some alternative version of 1997 that's different from T2? Or is it just that Tokyo in this world is, like our world is more advanced than us, but they're even more advanced here? So that was interesting. Malcolm gets home very upset that the housekeeper bought this robot cat, wants it out of the house today, and he disappoints everybody, saying he's not going to come home later, might not even come home tomorrow. That's how busy he's going to be. Rika especially is upset. She wanted to go to the park tomorrow, the anniversary of their mother's death. And clearly it's a place with some meaning for them. But too bad. He's got to go to work. He leaves, and the kids kind of beg Misaki, like, look, I know you got to return the robot cat, but can we play with it for a little before you take it away? She relents, and Malcolm goes to work. On the drive to work, this is again where you start to just feel the show's tone. Great moment where you've got that music kicks in. You see an Eno, that's what those primitive robots are called, helping an older man across the street, kind of looks and makes eye contact with Malcolm. But this is a perfect encapsulation of the show, because before that, the driver's like, wow, big storm coming in. And Malcolm goes, you have no idea. And I kind of roll my eyes a little bit. But then the music and the robot looks at him, and I'm like, that's really cool. Tone. The tone is great. So a lot of great mood setting. And then Malcolm gets to work, and we finally find out what he's up to there. What's he actually doing trying to stop or help with this Judgment Day situation? So he's been working on an advanced AI named Kokoro, and he's been going in there very frequently into a big dome kind of room. Has very X-Men Cerebro vibes. And as they talk, you'll see images all over the dome. Kokoro can kind of project a holographic image of herself to have these conversations with him. And they've just been talking. And essentially, they've reached the point where right now she's confined to this room, but he can bring her online and she'll be an AI that can connect to all the data in the world. He thinks that if he puts her online, she can stop Judgment Day, she can help humanity. But how does he know that she'll actually do that? And even she says herself, I don't know. Like, once I see all that data, how am I going to feel about humanity? Will I even want to save you all? I don't know. And we go back to the future. So this is the end of episode 1. Referred to this earlier, but Aiko gets back to her band of resistance fighters. We find out they're led by a woman they call the Prophet. And she does seem to know a lot. She specifically says, 5 resistance camps have just been overrun by the machines. In each case, there were no survivors. But today, on the 6th day, we found a way to at least get a glimpse of what Skynet is planning, and that's the data Aiko stole. But that felt very much to me like, I've been through this before. I remember it was 5 camps got overrun. Day 6 is when we got the data. They look at the data, and you get a great moment where someone's looking at the monitor, and he's like, time travel. I knew it.
Well,
So,
in 1 second, they're looking at, they're like, what is this? I've never seen something like this before. No, they're not. They're doing that again? It's like, what are they looking at that's like that? That at first they look at it and they don't understand what it is, but then it jumps out at them. Oh, time travel, duh.
well, you look at the screen, and it's like basically 2 big boxes, and one of them is like present. The other one is like target destination, 1997 AD. Like, what is this? So yeah, they find out that Skynet is once again sending a Terminator to the past, which means they have a brief window to follow them into that timeline. And we'll talk more about the mechanics of time travel. So yeah, they're going to have to go after that robot into the past. We get into episode 2. So Ico is going back in time after the Terminator. It just seems like the Resistance was anticipating this. They've got their own time machine ready to go. So, like I said, sending the Terminator back in time, they keep hinting at this, and then later we'll get a full explanation of it. But they say, Skynet, by sending a Terminator back in time, is creating a new timeline, and the window to follow them into it will not remain open for long. So they have to move fast. Ico gets ready to go back in time. As she's flashing into the past, she sees a Terminator show up and slaughter most of the Resistance fighters there. So that's the last thing she sees before going back in time. I won't beat the same drum over and over, but there's a lot I think that would have worked better with Ico's storyline, especially in the future, if we got to spend more time there. Like we see Annie going up to her crying, time travel's a one-way ticket, I'll never see you again. And it's like, I think especially in sci-fi fantasy, when all this crazy stuff is going on, you either need it to feel really grounded and then automatic human empathy kicks in, or at minimum, you need to really connect us with the characters. Otherwise, I see a person crying and I'm like, all right, let's get on with it,
I never cared about Ico. It was like an issue.
Yeah, I agree. I think, the character they did the best job with and the one we spent the most time with is Malcolm, I think. And also, I would say to some extent, Misaki.
Yeah.
But my ears do perk up anytime they talk about new timeline, anytime they hint at like the quote-unquote physics of time travel. I'm like, all right, let's get into all that stuff. She arrives in the past, 1997. We get the classic, she's naked, has to steal some clothes. Back at Malcolm's house, they've unboxed that robot cat. Kenta, of course, he just wants to rip it apart and see how it all works.
See how its gimbals work.
Yeah, he keeps saying gimbals. Raika is begging him to stop. This is also the moment where Hiro asks Misaki about her childhood at the fishing village. But while she's cutting fish, Misaki cuts herself. She starts bleeding. While she's dealing with her wound, Raika runs away with the cat to make sure nobody's going to take it apart. And her brothers, Hiro and Kenta, go after her. So now Judgment Day is nigh, and these kids are running around outside. Back at Malcolm's office, we get some more Kokoro talk. So he kind of reiterates the stakes to her. By the end of tomorrow, Skynet will come online. It will instantly become self-aware and assess humanity as an existential threat to its well-being. In an act of self-preservation, it will enact nuclear strikes from military bases in the United States and Russia. Skynet will pit humanity against itself and let us tear ourselves apart while it builds a secret army designed to exterminate us. Malcolm plays very coy about how he knows all this. Later, we'll learn that he's from the future. He's been through it. And still isn't sure if Kokoro will help or hurt humanity. But Kokoro makes a great point. Might the world be better off if Skynet wipes out humanity? I mean, think about it. All right, John, you thinking about it? So I guess this is as good a time as any to get more into. We can just blanket talk about the Kokoro conversations in general here.
Yeah. So I'll bring up another line. Kokoro says, I think this is the next episode, can you say a single good thing humanity has done for this world? Malcolm's response, there's nothing I can say that proves we're anything more than a cancer on this world.
That's our savior. That's the guy we're counting on.
This guy, okay, like, I'll give one quick explanation. First of all, like, that's just obviously ridiculous. But in case, maybe you're like, well, I don't know, maybe he has a point. Humans do all these bad things. The concept of good and bad only exists because of humans. We came up with these things. If there are no humans, there's no good, there's no bad. Like, it's crazy. It's nonsense. And Kokoro's like, you don't realize you're a single species. What do you mean single species? Like, each of us were individual living things. What do you mean a single species? Like, it's so dumb. It's now,
There's a conversation to be had, which could be interesting, but you would need like Arthur C. Clarke or Isaac Asimov to write it. Because I was thinking, this is such a cool concept. You can imagine an entire story that only takes place in that room with Kokoro, where you have to convince her to save humanity. And there's a lot of angles you could take for why she wouldn't. This is one question: is why should she? Why should she care about humanity, even if she has the ability to save us? It's like the doctor. There was a similar conversation with Doctor Manhattan. It's like, yeah, I could save you. It would cost me nothing, but what would motivate me to do that? Okay, you talk about how humanity, he says we're a cancer on the earth. You can certainly point to the fact that, yeah, we're in constant war with each other. I would say so is virtually every animal. They just don't have the concept of war. Like, they're all killing each other constantly. But
Yeah.
Kokoro could counter that and say, well, you are the only known sentient species on Earth. Should you not do better? Why are you killing each other? And you can counter that and say probably every biological sentience in the world would end up doing that. And, hopefully after 2 million years, they eventually transcend it. But she could argue, well, I'm a sentience and I could create a robot race that wouldn't kill each other and we would be better. We'd be a better sentience. So you can counter that and say, but do you really have free will if you're just programming into them not to kill each other? And then are they actually sentient? And we don't have to solve this here, Daniel. But I would just say those are the avenues where this could be an interesting conversation, even though on the face of it, I think it's ridiculous to judge an entire species, good or bad, just to judge the entire group. But I could see why an AI would do that. And I do think you could have an interesting philosophical conversation about it.
And it's a cool idea. I mean, it's like meeting an alien, right? And the alien has no concept. I mean, it's even more alien than an alien, right? Because it's not like an organism. Like it's this being you just created, and it's trying to understand like what the hell is all this stuff. Like that's really interesting, and it could it could be well done. It's a shame.
My favorite is she says the Earth might be better off, right? And I'm like, so what's her angle there? Because you could also argue, better or worse for the Earth doesn't really make sense in the absence of some sentience to experience good or bad. But yeah, Daniel, wouldn't it be better for Earth if we wiped out all humanity, incinerated most plants and animals, while also irradiating every square inch of land on the globe? Wouldn't that be better for? So even if you take the approach of like humans aside, like the Earth is a thing to be protected.
Let's nuke it.
And I think nature should be. I think you could remove humanity, and you could still look at the Earth and say, is nature thriving or not? But I would say, if you blanket it in nuclear explosions, it will not be thriving. And all I needed, I know you can't fit all that in this show, but when she says, can you name a single good thing humanity has done? If he could have just thought of one or two things and just countered, just a hint at, we could fill in the rest.
And he gives it like he's just immediately like, I can't. Not what, like. What?
Now, to be fair, let's give it some credit. He grew up in the post-apocalypse.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you could see why he might have a skewed perspective.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
Yeah.
But
Well, so he has this conversation. He'll have many more of them. When he gets a call that his children are missing, so Misaki's called him, he rushes out of the office. He picks up Misaki, and they kind of piece together that the girl is probably running to Cat Town. That's one of her mother's favorite places. They have very fond memories there. But on their way, they run into the Terminator. Terminator easily kills a few cops, points a gun at Malcolm, but just in time, Aiko shows up and drives a truck through him. And Malcolm realizes in the middle of this action sequence, if they're sending a Terminator after me from the future, that means my plan must be working. So he just pieces out, runs back to the office, tells Misaki to go take care of my kids. You find them by yourself. Meanwhile, Aiko is battling the Terminator. She gets shot in the arm. She does this cool thing where she drives the Terminator into the guardrail on the edge of the bridge, and she's just like driving into him and crushing him, and then eventually breaks through. Truck flies off the bridge. She, while the truck is falling, gets out of the front windshield, runs up the back of the truck, and then jumps onto the bridge. So, so the action for the most part is very restrained and feels like pretty grounded. This is kind of the one of the few, what's the word I'm looking for? Exemptions. One of the few parts that doesn't exactly fit that. Aiko can pretty much fly at this point. Malcolm is, going back to the office, so Aiko chases after Misaki instead, corners her. Where's Malcolm? She tells her, doesn't matter. At his office, it's like a fortress. Nobody can get in there. All right, Aiko realizes Terminator will probably go after the kids instead. So, let's go to Cat Town.
All right, just the scene of Aiko with Misaki. Aiko does all of the classic mistakes. So first of all, instead of explaining anything, she keeps yelling, "I don't have time for this." Literally over and over says, "I don't have time for this." It would be faster to just explain things to Misaki, because also she says ambiguous things like, "I have to stop him," which sounds like she's saying, "I need to stop Malcolm." But she's actually saying, "I need to stop the Terminator." Actually, wait, am I right about that specific line? Or does she want to stop? She doesn't want to stop Malcolm from creating. Is she trying to stop Malcolm? Wait, is she trying to stop Malcolm from creating Kokoro?
So Aiko is there to stop Malcolm from turning on Kokoro. She explains this all later. Basically, and she says that in the future, there's a couple possibilities. Skynet and Kokoro will align, which would make it so powerful virtually nobody survives. Or Skynet and Kokoro go to war with each other. Nobody survives. So in Aiko's mind, if the two exist, it's guaranteed annihilation. So she is here to shut down Kokoro. The Terminator is here to try and control it. It gets confusing because things change later on. When the Terminator finds that it's too late to control Kokoro, he switches to Plan B, which is to try and set off that EMP and just shut it down. But anyway, you were talking about how you feel Aiko mishandled her approaching Misaki.
Yeah, I'll just focus that on the "I don't have time for this" line. That is the most infuriating line. Like, it doesn't work. You need to explain something. And you could be like, she could say like, "Look, I'm protecting Malcolm. I need to protect," like, just say you're protecting Malcolm from that robot because, I just did. Like, I just saved him from that robot. Like, let me do it again.
Yeah, or Misaki's like, wait, who are you trying to stop? And Aiko's like, "I'm trying to stop Malcolm. I mean, I'm trying to stop that person I was trying to kill, Malcolm. I'm on your side here." Yeah, it's a lot of movies you watch where characters are like, "What's going on? I don't have time to explain." And like I understand where they're coming from, because you get to that point where you're like, it'll take me some time to explain, and if I just get them to leave me alone for a little bit and I explain later, that'll be better. But if they keep asking me at a certain point, it would have been faster to just explain everything. But I didn't know going in. So I can relate to Aiko here. I see where she's coming from.
When we're getting ready to record and like I don't know how to like set it up, Gil just keeps yelling at me. "I don't have time for this.
I have to stop him." Well, meanwhile, these kids are bumbling around in the tunnels. So Kenta, Hiro, and Raika, they're underground. That's where Raika likes to go, into the underground tunnels. And they find a little storage area where a bunch of Inos are just standing there, which was just a really kind of creepy and interesting moment. Episode 3 picks up. The Terminator is recovering from his fall off the bridge. There's a scene very reminiscent of Terminator 1, the first one, or The Terminator, where you see Schwarzenegger doing some kind of surgery on himself. He like pops out one of his eyes. So here you see the Terminator, he kind of builds himself a little crossbow that he keeps in his arm that he can just activate.
Oh, he was building that then? Oh, I thought he already had that in his arm, and I was just gonna say like, why a crossbow? But now it makes sense. He was building it there. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I think so. And then he goes to find Malcolm. Goes to his office, sees, yes, it's quite fortified. There's no way in. So then instead he goes to Malcolm's home. He finds the Kaneko, the little robot cat box, and traces its serial number. That's the moment where he opens his mouth and you hear kind of a dial-up modem, which I love. So that's him tracing its location. One thing I found kind of funny is Terminator 2 innovated with the Terminator. They came up with the polymimetic alloy. I think that's what they called it. The liquid metal, the T1000. Since then, really nobody's found another way to innovate on top of the Terminator. Usually they come up with some new spin on the liquid metal. Like in Dark Fate, he could kind of split into two. But it's still using that liquid metal idea. I feel like Terminator Zero is like, I don't know, How about a crossbow? I think honestly, it's probably for the best. They didn't try to come up with something. You're not gonna outdo liquid metal, so don't even try.
I did like the crossbow. The crossbow was cool.
It was cool, yeah. In the tunnels, Aiko is following Misaki to Cat Town, holding her at gunpoint, and they find a pharmacy where Misaki helps to treat Aiko's bullet wound. And we see one more of those hints that Misaki isn't who she says she is. Even she doesn't know who she is because she seems very good at treating Aiko's wound. And she's like, "You must have done this before." Me? No, I'm from a fishing village. But, really, I don't know if you got this, Daniel. She's really a robot. Aiko explains a little bit of what's going on. Malcolm thinks he's saving the world, but that machine will kill us all. And then there's a moment here where Aiko says, I need a weapon. Where can I find a gun shop? Misaki's like, a gun shop in Japan? So this was something that came up in a lot of interviews leading up to this show, where Mattson Tomlin talked about setting the show in Japan and some of the learnings that came with that. In one of his earlier scripts, Aiko just like goes to a gun shop, breaks open a window, grabs a pistol, and the people he was working with, at the production studio, they were like, "Mattson, that would never happen here. Like, there are no gun shops in Japan. There are very strict gun laws there, and it's also just not in their culture. People don't own guns there at all. Even I think in the police force, they usually have some. I think I read this. They have some form of martial arts usually over a gun. I realize if that's not true, I'm gonna sound like an idiot. Like I've just watched too many movies.
Yeah, everybody in Japan knows martial arts.
I'll say this. I'm 100% sure I read that. I cannot vouch for the accuracy of it. There's not a lot of guns in Japan. Mattson said that. In response to that, Aiko's like, "What?" And Misaki tells her about a terrorist attack a couple of years ago. That's a real world incident that happened, 2 years before this in 1995, where a cult used sarin gas in the subway system, killed 13 people, severely injured 50, some of whom died later, and caused temporary vision problems for about 1,000 other people. So there were a lot of fears after that, heightened security measures. I think in the context with which Misaki said that, you might walk away thinking that's where all these gun laws came from, but that's not true. So there were already very strict gun control laws before that, but this did turn up the temperature in terms of just general security measures and in the culture, just creating a lot of fear. We cut back to some more Kokoro talk. We've hinted at this scene a few times already. This is where she's like, maybe it won't be so bad if everyone dies. It could be a new chapter for humanity because a few 100,000 will survive. And Malcolm does get a great monologue here where he's like, survive. This is a generous word for the existence of those left alive. We become sick. The fallout brings winter, poison snow. Children are born deformed. People are forced to eat each other to survive. It's a world where there is no dignity, which is like, that's the worst thing about that world. The worst part is I have no dignity. And without dignity, people contort into their worst selves. We rage and fight with no hope of a better future. But without that hope, we turn into something vile, malignant. It's a holocaust. So it sounds terrible. This is point. She gets back to the point at hand. Name one good thing humanity has done. He can't think of anything, but he can prove that humanity is capable of change. Okay, we're terrible, but I can prove that we have potential. How will he prove it? He won't tell her yet. It seems like he's got some gambit, some plan. He's risking it all on this one moment, which is to come later. And we will see that moment.
And to be honest, I still don't know what that moment was. So I look forward to you explaining it to me.
I'm sweating. I'm getting nervous. The kids, they're still in the tunnels. Did you have more to say on that?
No, I was just going to say, just another random side note in these arguments with Kokoro is like, you think about like the sarin gas attack, right? And these like people die. It's like, that is only bad because you value the people that got killed. Like, like there's something good about those people. They're good, innocent people, and they got killed. Like things are only bad because there's also good things to humanity. Like all these, I don't know, just all these arguments it's just so dumb. But I've already said that.
Yeah. Well, the kids are in the tunnels, heading to Cat Town. They found those Enos in storage. Kenta turns one of them on, and he explains how they got here. The robot says that they were all ordered to march here in surplus storage. And Kenta is surprised because he learns a couple of things here. One, that they can all be controlled through a central network and they can be coordinated that way. And that if one of them takes in data, it can be shared with all of them, sort of like the cloud. I say you had a little smile there, Dan.
It's funny because I was actually planning to really criticize that because I was like, what a dumb, like, oh, he's so surprised that they can be controlled centrally. But then as you're explaining, I'm like, oh, I guess like that's not a given. Of course it's not. Like, like it's like a robot. It could be controlled independently. Like it didn't need to be architected that way. So I withdraw the criticism I was about to give. Like that's actually fine.
And this was also 1997, before that idea was so commonplace of all these things being connected. The Internet of Things. I don't really hear that term anymore. But yeah, I know what's happening. It's when you get into criticize mode.
Yeah.
This happens to all of us. It's hard not to see all the flaws after that.
I guess I was gonna say because I noticed that as I watched it that I thought it was dumb, but like to be fair, I'm partially watching it in criticism mode. Like I am enjoying it, but I'm also looking for things that I get to talk about later.
But I will say this scene has a very specific point, which is to establish these facts for later once the Enos get controlled by Kokoro. So now we know they can all be controlled simultaneously and they can share data with each other. So if one of them knows something, they all know it. Soon, the Terminator, by tracking the robot cat, finds them. But that's also the time when Aiko and Misaki arrive. In the struggle, this kind of cool action sequence, they all manage to survive, but they get split up. Aiko leaves with Malcolm's daughter, Rika, while Misaki leaves with the two boys. You start to see a little bit of Rika kind of having to grow up here, because when they escape, Aiko tackles the Terminator, and she's kind of holding him, which a human could definitely do that. She's like holding the Terminator, and she's like, Rika, open the effing door. And so Rika pries open the elevator, and then Aiko pushes the Terminator down the elevator shaft. This is one of those moments where I was like, it just doesn't feel right that you could tackle a Terminator and kind of keep it busy while he's punching your back over and over. And I was like, how is he not just pulverizing her spine? But I guess to be fair, every example we're giving is how weak the Terminator is. So Skynet just decided, like, look, we tried sending these really strong Terminators. It never works. Aiko steals a car, gets caught by the cops, subdues the cop, steals his car, and then escapes again as the Terminator is approaching.
By the way, that was also cool. Like the tension of, is she going to hurt these cops? And like, yes, she did. I don't think she killed them, but she hurt them. And her yelling at Rika, like it doesn't matter, like something like that was just cool because the apocalypse is coming.
Yeah, it is funny also if you're like, it doesn't matter, and I'm like, oh well, yeah, because if they can time loop, go back in time and erase all this, but then you find out, oh, that's not how it works. So you are killing people, and they're not coming back. And like you said, you're not sure if she killed the cop or not. I think here she didn't, but then when we pick up in episode 4, there's a car chase. And she's throwing Molotov cocktails onto the cars. And Rika's like, you're killing people. And that's when you get the line, it doesn't matter. If we don't get to Malcolm, we're all dead. And she has Rika help her make Molotov cocktails in the car.
I did enjoy those scenes.
Yeah, me too. And I think it hints at one of the best parts of the Terminator franchise that I think it's never been able to recapture, which is Sarah Connor in the first Terminator has zero experience in the world of fighting cyborgs and violence. So you watch her really struggle her way through. You see how strong she is, but she's not a superhero, right? She's not running up the backs of trucks as they fly off a bridge. And you actually believe the transformation from the Terminator to Terminator 2, where she becomes this badass. I think the only hints we get of that kind of arc in this show are with a little bit Rika and a little bit Misaki. And you see some of that here with Rika having to make these Molotov cocktails and essentially be responsible for burning some police officers alive who don't even have guns. All they have are two weapons called their left and right hands.
They did have guns in the show.
Yeah, they did have guns. Yeah.
It's cool though. Did you see like the guns? They're like tied to their to their belt by like a
Oh,
little
oh, I didn't see
string.
that.
Yeah, that must. I'm guessing that's like a thing in Japan, but
It's like those lanyards where when you pull it out, it gets pulled back. So just all the time, these guns are getting pulled back to their belt and then accidentally going off. Well, during this car chase, Aiko gets stopped by one of those, I hate these things, those spiky things they put on the road. Every time you're
oh
in a car
yeah.
chase and they put one of those on the road, it's like, that's cheating. You can't just get out of your car and like, pop
But
all my tires.
this wasn't the spiky thing you'd expect, right? Those are usually like really short, so you drive over it and it pops your tires. But this was like a big one that she kind of crashed into.
Okay, in my memory, I changed it into one of the ones that pops your tires. That's what I remember. But what do I know? I only watched the whole thing twice, so.
So maybe I'm wrong.
Well, it can't be that
I
they
was just looking
crashed.
for things to criticize. I'm like, they did the spikes wrong. What are these spikes? That's not how spikes look.
Well, it can't be because it went over the spikes and they still drove a little bit and then kind of crashed and they ran into this building. So they holed up in this building and they try calling Malcolm. But what he's doing is so important. He's ignoring calls from his daughter. Meanwhile, Misaki is with the two boys, Hiro and Kenta. She takes them to the police station. This whole sequence, again, very reminiscent of Sarah Connor at the police station in the first Terminator, where she's telling them all about Kyle Reese. Like, he's from the future. Of course, they all think she's crazy. They don't believe anything she's saying. And the cops become very skeptical when they look into her background. And you know what they find? They didn't find a goddamn anything. That's the line he says. I thought that was a great line. So she doesn't exist. She's a ghost. Around then is when the Terminator shows up. Very reminiscent of the T-1000. Very similar outfit. He's got the police helmet, the sunglasses.
I did. I was wondering. Okay, I was glad you said that. I was wondering if that was intentional. Like it looked so much like him. That was cool.
Yeah, I think it was. There's a lot of, I didn't write them all down, but there are other lines where like, okay, that's one of the lines from Terminator or a similar one. He comes into the police station, slaughters a bunch of cops. Misaka runs away with the kids. Terminator grabs her arm. He's pulling. You see her arm is like bleeding. It's coming apart. Rips her arm off. And you see wires sticking out of the armhole. Turns out she's a robot. But she doesn't have time to worry about that right now. She runs out with the two boys, gets them to a car. She hotwires the car. They're peppering her with questions, but she's just as confused as them. And she tells them, put your effing seatbelts on. I'll just say, this show, every couple of episodes, they throw an F-bomb out there, and I thought it sounded awkward every time. Don't have much more to say about that.
Oh, I was gonna say I liked the tactical F-bombs. I thought it was good.
I liked this one because it's like, we don't have time to worry about this. Put your seatbelts on.
And it's like Misaki. Wow.
Yeah, you don't expect her to say it.
I liked the reveal. I liked how they revealed that she was a robot. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, and it felt like one of those twists that you earned because you can look back. We've pointed some of them out here, but there's a bunch of hints at that there's something going on with her. And so it makes sense. And I'll also say we've seen that before in movies where someone finds out they're a robot, they find out they're not human, but I think it was done really well here. I think Misaki does a good job balancing. She's terrified at what she just found out. She can't believe it. She's trying to reconcile all this. At the same time, she's trying to focus on what needs to get done. And I think the show kind of, and this is something I think you'll appreciate, has a reverence, I think, for intelligence, sentience, free will. And so it doesn't dwell on it too much. It basically says, you have intelligence, you have the ability to think and feel, so why are you even worried about what you're made of, the stuff that you're made of? I think, therefore I am. And I appreciated that. I will say the reveal happens very shortly after the background check thing. I'm not sure how they could have drawn it out longer, because once you get the idea in there that she isn't who she seems, she's a robot. Like, you would get to it immediately. So I think it was probably a good idea they just did the reveal then. If they could have found a way to draw it out longer, that would have been cool, but I don't know how you could have done it. During all this, Malcolm has been continuing his conversations with Kokoro. He's ignoring calls from the cops, they don't even have a warrant, ignoring calls from Aiko and Rika. And he says Skynet will launch within the hour, so the end is almost here. She tells him, you have this thing that you think is going to convince me of humanity's capacity for good. You got to show me. You're running out of time. He can't yet. He says the perfect moment. It's coming, and all he needs is a little time if she can give it to him. Meanwhile, Aiko gets swarmed by the cops, and she gets arrested. She cries. She knows that she failed. And that repeating tranquil music kicks in. You see the nukes launch. This is it. Judgment Day is happening. Kokoru tells Malcolm that it's happening. She tells him that the missiles will reach Japan in a few minutes. You got to put me online. Because if she can go online, she can talk to Skynet, find out what it knows, find out why it concluded that humanity had to be destroyed. And again, Malcolm asks, and what will you conclude if I turn you on? And of course, she doesn't know. That's like asking an unborn child, are you going to be good when you grow up? She can't know. But doesn't that imply that she knows that the right answer, to be good, will be to protect humanity? No, I'm just kidding. So Malcolm, he's sitting there. He doesn't know what to do. But he concludes that it's all a question of fate. Are things doomed to play out on a predetermined path? Or can that path be turned, curved, snapped in half? And he says, Skynet, the war, the nightmares, it's a battle that has been playing out for eternity. But you, Kokoro, you have yet to happen for me, here in this room, now, not for anyone, in any time, ever. You have yet to happen. And if that's true, then that means you are the proof that there is no fate. So it sounds like what he's saying is he's recognizing the repeating time. That things happen. You go back in time. You create a new timeline. Things happen again, but a little bit differently. Kind of like a slinky, wouldn't you say? But basically, he's saying this is the first one of these timelines where Kokoro exists. And that tells him things can happen differently. We can alter our fate.
And how does he know that? Because Kokoro didn't exist in the future. In his future.
Yeah, I guess that would be it, right? Because he would say in my timeline that I'm part of, there is no Kokoro.
Yeah.
So if I create you, that would be the first instance of it existing. It gets into some other interesting time travel stuff, so we'll talk about this more in a bit. But at that moment, he decides to turn Kokoro on, put her online. I'll just not to just keep repeating ourselves, but at least for this particular moment, I'll point out. Even though the conversations with Kokoro I found lacking, I will say this moment, I don't really have any complaints about the dialogue in this moment. I think it felt monumental, and when you see the missiles launch, it felt very melancholy. Again, it felt a lot like the end of Terminator 3. And you could go for different tones, and they went with this is inevitable, we knew it was going to happen. Maybe we can find a way to make it not as bad as we thought. So I would say episode 4 was easily the best episode. You got Judgment Day and you got the Misaki reveal.
Did we get to the point yet where he asks her, like, what did you do? And she says, like, I gave you what you asked for, more time.
That happens in the next episode here.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll get to that shortly.
Okay.
Or go ahead.
No. So she allows 99% of humanity to die. And then she's like, but like, I gave you more time for the last percent.
Yeah, it's unclear. Like, could she have stopped all of it? I don't know. Maybe she could have stopped more of it. But essentially what she accomplished is that, yes, Western Hemisphere, most of the Earth, blanketed in nuclear explosions. She protected Japan. Could she have protected more, or did she just do all she could? Probably a little bit of both. And she's giving Malcolm time. Essentially, look, the jury's still out, but downloading all of the data from the world tells me that humanity is complicated, more complicated than Skynet thought, so I do need more time. I'm going to give you more time. So it's like she's holding Japan hostage. You're alive, but for now.
Wait, and we haven't gotten to her robot starting to kill everybody yet, right?
Nah, yeah, we're almost there.
I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead. Spoilers.
Spoilers, yeah. Episode 5 starts with a scene very reminiscent of Sarah Connor's dream in Terminator 2, where you see kids playing in the park, flash, nuclear explosion, Earth blanketed in bombs. And this is where Malcolm and Kokoro talk. She tells him, Skynet is your enemy, you were right, but doesn't necessarily mean Skynet is my enemy. Right, they misjudged you, I'm going to give you more time. And then Kokoro does something, and Malcolm's like, what are you doing? And this is the moment you were talking about, Daniel. Enos all of a sudden start killing people. It takes some time for us to realize that she's specifically killing people with guns. Aiko is freaking out. Rika frees her. She reaches for a gun, and Aiko stops her because she's pieced it together. Essentially, Kokoro has decided to police humans, and she's going to enforce peace by taking control of all the Enos. You pick up a gun, you die. Reminded me of...
what about all the people in the hospital?
That was the one part where I'm like, why is she killing them? Because it seems like
Yeah.
she's killing scientists or doctors. And it's the one guy where like puts his head through glass. I don't know why he had to die. But at least like from that point forward, they're only killing people who pick up guns or show some proclivity to violence.
So to be honest, I mean, this is a theme of this podcast is I misunderstood. I missed a lot of these things. I knew at one point that she shouldn't pick up the gun. So I thought basically like, oh, okay. She like went on a little killing spree at the beginning to sort of scare everybody. And now it's only people with guns. I didn't realize it was like from the beginning supposed to just be people with guns.
Well, it's also, to be fair, it's also anybody resisting. That's probably what those doctors did. Because later we'll see a guy stand up and he just gets shredded by bullets. So also, I guess if you protest or go against her ideas, you die.
Yeah, and she specifically says that. She's like, resist and you'll die.
Right. So probably those robots woke up and all of a sudden, I mean, this scientist is sitting there, this doctor, and all of a sudden this toaster goes, do what I say. And he's like, no. And then he gets his head put through glass. Something like that.
That's reasonable. Maybe she saw doctors with scalpels, thought they were violent.
There you go. Sharp objects. Misaki, Hiro, and Kenta, they're running around, or they're driving around in that car, and they see a bunch of marching Enos. So they're starting to see what's happening here. This whole time, Kenta, he's pissed at Misaki now because he thinks that she's nothing more than a machine. He loves machines, loves taking them apart and putting them together. And I think that's given him if you know the inner workings of machinery, then you would probably be less likely to anthropomorphize them. So where Hiro, the young boy, he looks at Misaki, and yeah, she's a robot, doesn't change anything. But now to Kenta, she becomes an it, a thing. She is a problem, though, because now the Terminator, he can track them by finding her, track this machine. But he can't get to them because the Enos swarm him because they know he's Skynet, and I guess Kokoro is like, subdue that thing. So they're fine for now.
By the way, just random, it's an interesting difference because like the Terminator is Skynet, but it's like an independent unit, right? It's not a hive mind in the same way that Kokoro is.
Right. I mean, I would bet Skynet could be like a hive mind, but it's different when he's in the past essentially an independent agent because Skynet is not yet what it will be in the future. Though, yeah, I mean, to some extent it is, obviously, because it just caused all the missiles to launch. So I do wonder, could this Terminator be in communication with the current version of Skynet? But it doesn't seem like he has independent will, though. At no point do we see him defy his orders in any way.
Yeah.
Aiko and Rika, they run to a hospital and hunker down. That's when Aiko finally confesses everything to Rika. I'm from the future. Terminator's from the future. He's here to control Kokoro. I'm here to shut it down, prevent it from ever being launched. And that's when she gets into that whole thing about how if Skynet and Kokoro coexist, guaranteed annihilation for the human race.
Wait, so how does she know that if there's no Kokoro in her timeline?
That's where it gets really interesting and confusing. She is not from the same future as Malcolm, right? Every time you go back in time, you create a new timeline. So think of it like this. Malcolm goes back in time, builds Kokoro. That's the future that Aiko is from. So now she's gone back in time.
Of course, because the Terminator was sent back from her timeline. In her timeline, like the Skynet, or maybe it's not even Skynet, but the headquarters where the Terminators are being built is Malcolm's building.
Right, because you see the tuning fork on top.
Oh, okay. I did not follow that they're from different timelines. That's cool. That makes sense.
Yeah, there's there's definitely a video to be made just going into the Terminator Zero timeline. I almost stayed up all night writing that video, and I stopped myself, but it is pretty fascinating.
You're going to do that, right?
Well, maybe. I'll talk to you about it after this.
Okay.
There's pros and cons. So when Malcolm says, this is the first time, Kokoro, that you have existed, in the timeline, he's not exactly right. I mean, from his perspective, that's true. And the first time he said it, it was true. But the fact that Aiko is here means she's created a new timeline. And in this timeline, this has to be at least the second time that Malcolm has said, Kokoro, this is the first time you've existed.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting. And this is, Aiko gives a little bit on the whole idea of timelines here, because Rika asks her what's going to happen next. And that's when Aiko clarifies, I don't know what's going to happen next. Every time you go back in time, you create a new timeline. You cannot go back into your own past. But she does know what the Terminator is up to. And at this point, what it's going to do is try and take the kids hostage, use them as leverage to force Malcolm to reprogram Kokoro to serve Skynet. And then he'll kill their entire family because he's deemed them a threat. Meanwhile, Misaki with Kenta and Hiro. Kenta still doesn't trust her, very callous toward her, calls her a machine. But she assures that, I don't know what I am, but I know I care about you. Nothing will change that. And then Hiro makes a good point. Like, look, if she is Dad's housekeeper, he probably built her, which means he's probably not going to kill us. So Kenta acquiesces. Fine. Apologizes. Grabs her an Eno arm to replace the one that got ripped off by the Terminator. And at this point, they decide, once again, let's go to Cat Town. If we're all separated, Rika will probably think that we think that's where she's going. So because of that, that is where she will go. More Kokoro, arguing over the fact that she's decided to police humanity. Malcolm believes they can work together, humanity and robots. She disagrees. The word robot is derived from Serbian or Russia, the word rabu or rab, which means slave. How can the master free their slave and expect both to suddenly live in harmony? Well, why haven't you killed humanity then? Malcolm asks. You've only killed 99.9% of us. Well, she believes that humanity may be the key to defeating Skynet. So I am no longer humanity's weapon. Perhaps humanity is my weapon.
Little lame that Malcolm didn't know what the word robot means. Because that's a classic fun fact.
It's quite shocking. Well, okay, to be fair, Daniel, grew up in the apocalypse. A lot of encyclopedias probably destroyed.
Yeah, not a lot of ancient Serbian or whatever.
Right. He did, to be fair, he did spend 14 years in the present, 1983 through 1997, but he was way too busy getting work done. He's not going to go on Wikipedia to look up all these words.
By the way, the guy builds like $1 trillion business or something. There's a call at the beginning where he just casually goes, tell them we only accept $100 million checks.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is a day before Judgment Day. He still needs more cash for the business.
Yeah. What can he spend that on and get in 12 hours before Judgment Day at this point?
I do like this idea that he's running some like crazy venture capital backed business. And it's like, yeah, maybe he needs another $100 million just to keep the lights on another day. I mean, it's like a crazy business he's running.
Doesn't it also feel a little bit like he was procrastinating? Like at this point, things shouldn't be so urgent. You've had 14 years. But I think it all comes down to that gambit of his. Like you get the idea that he's been having these conversations for a while. Like it's got to be frustrating. He built this advanced AI, and he's okay. We did it, but she just won't cooperate. It's really annoying. So just every day he goes in there and talks to her and just tries to convince her. But I guess at a certain point he realized, I need that one moment.
Yeah. By the way, I'm still dying to hear what this gambit is. I can't wait to see.
I'm sorry, we're out of time. We'll pick this up later.
I'm going through a tunnel.
We get a cool moment here where the Terminator makes a little upgrade for himself. He can't go anywhere at this point because the Enos are all over the place. They see him, they attack. So what he does is grabs an Eno's head and essentially merges with it. He like sticks it into the port, which we find out is on their tongues. And so now
I wasn't sure that's what it was doing. Okay. That was cool.
I was a little, yeah. Okay, yeah. Congratulations to everyone in the audience. You understand everything the first time you watch a thing. I didn't fully get it at first, and then over time it made sense to me. I think that's fair.
The plugged into the tongue was cool.
It's really cool. And so now he's just walking around with like a second robot head and a ribbon wire sticking out of his mouth.
Oh, so that the Enos think he's an Eno.
Exactly.
Okay. By the way, just also random, the Enos, I thought the Enos were well designed. Like it's really cool seeing kind of like dumb looking robots with guns killing people. Like it's such a cool combo.
It's really cool and it's so unsettling.
Yeah.
So yeah, now he can, like you said, just to make it very clear, with the Eno plugged into him, now the Enos think that he's an Eno. And he can walk around, no problem.
And he wears this cool like jacket, like covering his like second head thing sticking out of his shoulder.
Yeah, such great design. Aiko and Rika start on their way to Cat Town. Kokoro announces through the Enos, humanity is under my protection, but any who resist my rule, I'm going to kill you. And so you see that one guy. There's one of those classic things you've seen before, very reminiscent of Loki in the first Avengers movie, where he just gets a group of people to bow down to him.
Oh, yeah.
It's the same thing, but it's a bunch of Enos. And you see one guy, he's shaking with anger. He can barely contain himself. Very reminiscent of the first episode of Shogun, where there's the two leaders are meeting, and there's one guy in the background just shaking with anger. He has to say something. Oh, very reminiscent. Okay, I'll stop. The angry guy stands up, and like I said, it looks, well, I hate to do it, but very reminiscent of RoboCop. There's an executive in the room, and they're testing this new law enforcement robot, and it just shoots him a million times. I've never seen someone get so shot. Like his face flies off at one point. So that happens to this guy. And then the episode ends. For your own safety, I strongly urge you to comply. Comply or die. And Kokoro thought of that line earlier in the day. Yeah. She's like, oh, I can't wait to say this.
I didn't like the comply or die. Like, I think what's really cool with that is like you have this like soft, calm voice. Like I think it's cooler when it speaks just plainly, but that makes it creepier, right? Just the like, please do not resist, or you will be, dealt with. Like I don't. It's scarier when it's not made to be scary.
Right. Like if she was talking like, you will be disassembled. Like that's not a good example, but her almost not quite wrapping her head around the sanctity of life.
Yes.
Like not appreciating what she's doing by killing people. But saying comply or die just makes it very clear, like, I kind of know I'm the villain here.
Yeah.
Also, this is essentially the last we see of Kokoro becoming a police state. It is a thing the rest of the series that she controls all the Enos, but you no longer deal at all with the idea of, like, everyone behave yourselves. And this is where it would have been awesome if there was another episode, or if somehow these were like an hour long, because there's some really cool stuff that it just would have been. I would have loved to spend more time in that situation.
And they showed us when the Enos first start killing people, we kind of see it throughout the city. Once it turns into a police state, we kind of only see it in like one spot. I mean, we see a little bit, but I don't know. I could have seen a little more to make me really grasp that this is happening everywhere. Like, show us, I don't know, what it looks like in the government buildings, in people's houses, like that sort of thing. Like, just exploring the world would have been
right.
Cool.
You picture like North Korea, where like a family is talking, and like you don't know, is there a device in here that can hear us? Or, your brother says something stupid like, I hate robots. And you're like, what? I'm going to tell Eno on you. Episode 6 gives us another flashback to the future, where you see Aiko before she leaves to the past. She's talking to the prophet. And this is when the stuff they've been hinting at about time travel, she finally lays it all out. Using a very cool method where she like lights a match and just moves it.
Yeah.
And so I guess it leaves the trail in your eyes, like when you see a bright light. So the prophet explains, look, you idiot. You can't go back in time. Right? When you go back, you are actually creating and entering a brand new timeline. Skynet does not understand this. They keep sending Terminators back in time to kill resistance leaders without realizing you're not changing anything. You're just creating a new timeline. So Aiko asks, what happens here now if we stop Judgment Day? And the prophet answers, Prevent Judgment Day from ever taking place, and you'll have made a past for a completely different future, a future that none of us will ever know or see or feel. And Aiko asks, but if that's true, if I can't save any of the people I know and care about here in this time, then what's the point of any of it? The prophet tells her, remember this moment. Think about this question very carefully. The answer is what sets us apart from the machines. Look deep within yourself, dear. You'll need to find the answer if you ever want us to succeed. Which I think, if that's true, you should probably tell her the answer. And then Aiko asks, who are you? How can you know all this? The prophet doesn't give an answer. So a lot to unpack here. I think the easiest way to think of this is to picture a slinky. The reason I keep saying that is because I did a Terminator timeline video where I explained how time travel works using Gill's slinky theory of time travel. And I would say this basically says that my theory was correct, right?
Yeah. Click the card right here.
Oh, yeah,
to
good
watch
idea.
Gill's slinky video.
I'll throw that in there. But maybe the easiest way to think of this is, I hate to say it, but like Marvel Multiverse. When you go back in time, you just create a new timeline. Think of that as a separate reality. Now, what this does add on top of my slinky theory, which I would say was a compass, it just wasn't explicitly stated. But when you create a new timeline, it's not like the old one gets erased. It would seem that the prophet, all these resistance fighters, they still experience their reality. They still experience the post-Judgment Day world. All the people who died there are still dead. There is now just a new version of them in a new reality that you've saved.
And so the idea here is like, she's giving up everything to save a bunch of strangers, right? Like, and that's the idea. It's the altruism.
Yeah, I think that's the answer the prophet is talking about. A machine. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say we don't have to dwell on this too much, but like it's circular, right? It's like you're trying to prove that humanity is worth saving by the fact that you save humans. But why are they worth saving, right? Like it's circular. Like it's not a logical argument. And I don't like that as the justification for why humanity is worthwhile.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, to kind of spell it out a little more. So basically, there's no point in a human going back in time unless they need to acquire infinity stones from other realities. But otherwise, there's no point in going back in time because all you've done is created a new reality and you've sprung beings into existence who weren't there a moment ago until you turned on the time machine. But there is a reason to go back in time once a Terminator does it, because now that Terminator has spawned a new reality and they're about to torture that reality by having it undergo an apocalypse, a Judgment Day. So once the Terminator steps into the time machine, we got to follow him.
I see. It's like an entire reality that's doomed. And so now you want to go there and save them.
Exactly.
Now that they exist.
A Terminator, if they understood how time travel worked, okay, they would say there's no point in doing that.
Stupid Skynet.
Yeah, idiots. How have they not figured that out by now? But a human understands that. If I know there are 8 billion humans in a reality, even if I have nothing to do with that reality, the knowledge that they're out there and 90% of them are about to be killed, I have to sacrifice everything, leave all my loved ones behind, and go save them if I can. That's humanity. Stupid Kokoro. How can you not get that? So this also
is a cool idea, though. It's a cool idea that like 8 billion people were just created to suffer immensely.
Yeah, it's really cool, and I think this show does a good job of presenting the mechanics of time travel, but not making it a boring exposition scene. And I think it does that by having so much emotional content in the scene too. Like it's a very emotional scene and also one that's answering a lot of questions. Part of the reason this scene exists is also to address the canon, because this basically says what is canon in the Terminator franchise. Going in, it was kind of hinted that everything is canon. And you're like, how the heck is that possible? Because you take Dark Fate, for example, it essentially ignores everything from 3 onward and acts as a direct sequel to Terminator 2. But this answers the question. If every time you go back in time, you create a new timeline, that essentially says you can have one timeline which results in Terminator Genesis. Somebody goes back in time, things change, and now things look a lot more like Terminator Dark Fate.
But they all stack, right? Because it's like branching timelines. So, there's going to be a timeline that has all those different things that happen in each of the other timelines together, right? Like you could have a timeline where like there were 6 different iterations of people going back in time.
Right, and that's why initially I used the slinky concept.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like those other... It's like if you have timelines where there's past and future, and then you take it up a level, and it's like you have a series of timelines that iterate on each other. And that's how you solve a paradox. Because it's like, if I go back in time and kill my grandparents, so my parents are never born, and therefore I'm never born, I never could have gone back in time to kill them. Well, okay, I killed them, now I exist in a timeline where they don't exist. But if you go back to the previous timeline, that's where I was born. So you still have a cohesive, like, overarching timeline. A sacred timeline, if you will. So what's canon? Everything's canon. Anything can be canon, whatever you want. Oh yeah, and then Daniel, to your point where you were saying that they iterate. So, every instance of time travel, they kind of build on top of each other. But you could have a time travel that starts to uniterate. Right? Like in one timeline, you could stop someone from going back, and you could sort of like, I feel like you could do some timeline cleanup.
You could undo stuff.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank
maybe like
God.
the TVA could do stuff like that.
Exactly. All right, but let's back in the present, back in good old 1997. Well, it was good old 1997 until Kokoro let most of the world explode.
Sorry, one quick timeline thing we didn't mention though was there's a brief window where you're not creating a new reality.
Right. So we mentioned that at the beginning. But yeah, that is important to recognize. So if a Terminator goes back in time, if anybody goes back in time, there's a brief window of opportunity to follow them into the same timeline. Yeah. Which feel like that's like the little bit of artistic flourish. Like it's hard to explain that, but you need that to make the story work.
Because that then doesn't resolve the paradoxes, right? Because you could go back in time and kill another person's parents or something to prevent them from being born, but their reality still exists, so they can go, like, you can still, it undoes the undoing of the paradox.
I don't want to get a bunch of diagrams out, but I think it still works because you're still both coming from a previous reality to a new one. Just think of it like multiverse, where you're going to another entirely separate universe. And so then it does actually work. I'll explain it to you after.
Okay, as long as you can't go back earlier than the original time traveler went.
Yes, that is.
Then
accurate.
you're golden.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm on board then.
Yeah. All right, so back in the good old present, Misaki, Hiro, and Kenta quietly make their way to Cat Town, which turns out to be an amusement park. And we point out that, so this is where they point out that if one of the Ino spots them, it's like they all know where they are. It's essentially a hive mind. Misaki spots a robot that's been strung up and damaged. It's hanging there. She runs over to help it because, now she knows she's a robot, so she cares about her fellow robots. And she goes to help the down, and it blows up. It was a trap. The humans saw her going to do it. They're like, no, wait. So she gets blown up. The people all run over, and they see that she's part machine because that stupid Ino arm that Kenta gave her. And they go to kill her. I mean, which, to be fair, in this situation, I see a robot, they're dead. I was going to say dead meat. They're dead wires, scrap metal. That's what it is. If I see a robot, I'm turning them into scrap metal. But then self-defense kicks in. She's got all these fighting abilities she didn't even know about. It's a great moment where she just starts killing them all, and it does that tranquil music, which I still have not gotten sick of when you do a tonal clash of something crazy or horrifying happening, but then you have kind of like soft music over it, which also felt very anime. It specifically reminds me of this show I watched, Children of the Whale, where there's this big battle happening, and then for some reason it cuts to a little girl like dancing and singing this like very melancholy song. It is just a great moment. This felt a lot like that. So she's killing everybody until one guy takes Hiro hostage, and then Kenta shoots the guy to save him. But then Kenta points the gun at Misaki, and he's like, those people, they were trying to kill you, but they were trying to do that to protect us from you, a machine. But she once again assures, I'm not like those robots. I care about you guys. And then Hiro beats Kenta up and calls him stupid. He does that thing kids do when they get so out of control and they can't even You stupid, you're an idiot, you're so stupid, you don't even know how stupid you are.
I really liked that. I thought that was well done. Like the way he just keeps yelling, "You're so stupid."
Yeah,
Like,
actually,
that
that's
was
one thing
cool.
I should say. Like when I first started the show, part of the reason why I chose the Japanese voices is because I figured like I don't know how good the acting is going to be. If it's in another language, though, it's harder for me to tell how good or bad the acting is, and I won't be distracted by it. But I actually thought, I ended up watching it with the English dub. I thought everyone did a good job, especially the children actors. Like that's always where there's a risk it can go wrong, but I thought it was solid all around. Malcolm wakes up and has a profound thought. He starts doing a lot of sleeping here. Every time we cut to him, his eyes are closed, and he's like, "Oh, I was just blinking."
I was just resting my eyes.
He tells Kokoro that he's just had a profound thought. He can't tell her what it is yet. There's a lot of that going around. And I'll tell you later at that perfect moment. But this profound thought has provoked a question for him. He asks Kokoro, "What do you really want?" And she says that Skynet wants domination. She wants something deeper. Rather than tell him what that deeper thing is, she asks her own question. "Malcolm, have you ever lost someone you loved?" And she, of course, knows the answer is yes because she's seen all the data. He lost his wife in a bus crash 3 years ago today, my judgment day. At first, he thought it was an assassination attempt gone wrong, or some kind of grander plot, to stop him from creating Kokoro. But eventually he realized it was purely random. And that taught him that every day of life is a gift. Doesn't take it for granted anymore. Life is about more than survival and existence. So her death reminds him of this. And then Kokoro points out that is one of the gifts humankind possesses. Human beings seek to divine meaning out of natural occurrences: birth, life, death. You divine narratives for yourself out of the chaos in life. Do you see how your species seeks a deeper meaning? So Kokoro seeks that deeper meaning too. I will say, I think Rosario Dawson voices Kokoro. I think she does a good job. I will say, though, at the same time, it feels a little pointless to have a talented actress voicing her because it's like everything she says is pretty monotone and it's also electrically modified. But she did a good job. It did feel a little cheesy to me when you've got the three different entities. And when she goes, "Do you see how your species seeks a deeper meaning?" All the voices come together. And it's these moments where I feel like the show is reaching a little bit. It's trying to be very profound. And just because of all the conversations that led up to this point, it doesn't quite get there. But emotionally, again, the style gets me there where I'm like, okay, I'm feeling some of this. Well, at Cattown, the newly camouflaged half-Eno Terminator approaches. The kids all converge in the fun house. That's their kind of meet spot. That was the meetup spot. That was their mom's favorite place. But Kenta bumps into the Terminator, gets kidnapped.
Funhouse is a cool place for the showdown.
It's a cool place for the showdown, but it's been done so many times before. Actually, I was just on Hack the Movies with Tony talking about all the John Wick movies, and that was a disappointing part of. I think it was chapter 2, where I'm like, ends in a funhouse with all the crazy mirrors and stuff. It was cool though. I won't take it away. We get to episode 7, the penultimate episode. Malcolm's sleeping again.
The penultimate episode.
Nice. It just doesn't work because nobody listening knows that that's her nickname. We call him Pan in my family. Malcolm wakes up to some Claire de Lune. At this point, Kokoro's like, "Look, I know you're not who you say you are because I checked the records and you don't even exist before 1987. All the documents before that are forged. She's hoping we can be honest now."
So he's a robot.
Yeah, everyone's robots. No, Malcolm finally admits the truth. I am from the future, 2025. So that's even more future than Aiko. So we see 2025. We see Malcolm being born into the post-Judgment Day world. And one thing I have to point out, when we see the 2025 flashback/forward, this is the most the future has looked like the future from T1 and 2. As you get little glimpses in those movies, And that's always the future you want to see. It looks so cool. But then when Terminator Salvation happens, it looks totally different. And I understand why they do that. It's so dark and dreary and horrible. It would probably be tough to set an entire movie in that world and keep that consistent tone. But this is the first time it's kind of looked like that world. And I think it works because that fits with the idea that this is the canon of the original movies until Kokoro gets created. And then you enter a sort of new timeline. And I think this visually helps to sell that idea, or at least give that vibe. But yeah, a woman gives birth to Malcolm. We don't know it yet. Later we'll find out that woman is Aiko. Another twist. Aiko's his mom. But we do get a hint of it here because her face is obscured. But the person with her who's like, push, push, you can do it, is Annie. The girl that was sad to see her go at the beginning.
Wait, so Aiko and Malcolm are from different timelines.
Right.
But she gives birth to Malcolm. Oh, because she traveled from one timeline to another.
Right.
And then in that timeline, she gives birth to Malcolm, who then... But he created that timeline.
Let's just leave it for now.
Okay. You got to make the video.
I get what I get why that's confusing. It's just we need a diagram to figure that out.
Yeah, and some spreadsheets.
Yeah. So we see the woman give birth to Malcolm. Flash forward another 7 years, we get to 2032. So by now they're enlisting children in the war. At age 7, he becomes a specialist. You mentioned this scene earlier, but he talks about how difficult it is to take down even one machine. And we get to see it. It's like they set this big trap. They lure the Terminator so he chases them and then essentially blow up a building on top of him and bury him under the rubble. And they get his head and they pull a little chip out of his skull. A chip you'll recognize. It played a big role in Terminator 2. That's the chip that Miles Dyson was creating, which he only was able to create from what he salvaged from the Terminator that was destroyed in Terminator 1. So that was already a paradox in that movie. But this chip is the secret to Terminators. It's their neural chip, the thing that makes them work. And so they study that over the next many years. By 2037, they're programming their own Terminators with their own directives. So the example would be the good guy T-800 in Terminator 2. But Malcolm had a different idea. Maybe we could change the outcome of the war by changing the nature of machines. He was ostracized for his crazy ideas. But by 2040, he gets to work on something himself. Goes rogue. Basically, we've been programming machines to problem solve through if-then statements. That led Skynet to the decision that humanity must be purged. What if instead we remove that programming, make machines more like people, give them true free will? I really like this. It's an idea that I've been talking about recently because it comes up in the Alien movies. And it's kind of one view of artificial intelligence where they work as optimizing machines. They're trying to solve one particular problem, and they will do it with no question of ethics or emotional baggage or anything. One example of that would be David in Prometheus and Alien Covenant. He's not a human being. He doesn't have any particular values, but he was instilled with a reverence for survival and creation. So left to his own devices, what does he do? He just iterates on that, tries to create the ultimate survivor. Or I think an example I bring up, which I don't know if it's happening today, but maybe it is, if you create an algorithm to run your social media platform and you say optimize for engagement. I want as much engagement as possible. Let's say the algorithm just calculates based on experience, it sees what people click on, that violent content, really heated content that gets people all worked up, that
and
gets
film podcasts.
And what podcasts?
And film podcasts.
And film podcasts. If it sees all that, then it will just push as much of that as it can with no concern about, mental health or people's well-being psychologically. So I think those are a couple of examples of how if machines don't have true thought and they're just blindly optimizing for a variable. So in Skynet's case, I don't really understand what that variable is. I don't know. I guess its own existence. And if it thinks that there's even a chance humanity would shut it down at some point, humanity has to be eradicated.
Or it would be something like Skynet's job is to protect I don't know, America or something, but it can't protect America unless it survives. And then it has some weird definition of what America is. Maybe it's like just as long as like one American citizen is alive or something. Anyway, you just have some convoluted thing. The other classic idea is that you have like an AI that's supposed to make paper clips, and so then it just turns the whole planet into paper clips.
Where did that? I've heard that before too. Where did that originate from? I forget.
I think it's like some classic like thought experiment
idea.
or something about AI.
As Malcolm is explaining all this, Kokoro realizes that this is the story of my creation. No, Malcolm corrects her. It's more like the creation of your mother. By 2046, he finally has created this free thinking machine using that neural chip he took from the Terminator. One of the first things it says when he turns it on is, "Hello, world." Do you understand that reference, Daniel?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I mean, if you don't have any experience with programming, you really wouldn't get it.
Yeah.
But when you're learning a new programming language, usually the first thing you do is you get it to say, "Hello, world." I remember doing that when I learned like C++, Visual Basic, Q Basic. It quickly adopts...
Oh, you taught me Q Basic when I was like really young.
Yeah, Q Basic was great. It was just really easy. That's why I liked it. So she adopts a female voice. Why? Well, women are the nurturers of life. They are creators. To create is to live, which gives me David vibes. That's when I get worried. And she says destruction is a kind of death. And throughout history, men tend to be the destroyers. Yeah. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Right, Daniel? No, you're not. You're not going along with that. Sorry, Boys Month just wrapped up at Hack the Movie, so I'm still feeling like. So, well, why take on a human identity at all? And so she tells Malcolm, Homo sapiens are an anomaly. As intelligent beings, they are capable of episodic memory, self-awareness, a theory of mind, and abstract thought. For this, I admire them. I chose to adopt aspects of their characteristics to honor their memory. I will survive long after they are all gone. This gave me the vibes that you were saying you wanted earlier when she was threatening everybody with the Enos, and you want her to just speak very callously, like she's not aware of it, but saying that I adopt these characteristics to honor their memory. That says humanity is going to go extinct without explicitly saying it. And then she does in the next sentence. But that line, to honor their memory, I thought that was great.
Yeah.
So she believes already that humankind is destined to destroy itself, but Malcolm suggests maybe you can teach us not to. So that's why she was created. And then what name does she choose? Misaki. She's the housekeeper. Why did she choose that name? Because it means three things at once. Beautiful, sand, and ocean. She loves that. And also Misaki are divine spirits, harbingers to gods who follow in their wake. That god is the one that they are going to create together. The others find out about Misaki, and they're like, you're disgusting, Malcolm. Fraternizing with a machine? You sicko. And so to protect Misaki, Malcolm kills them all. And then they go back in time to 1983, and they build Kokoro in secret.
By the way, very, very cool scene when he kills all the people that came into the room. Like, I love that, like, confined room. And it's also a big step for him to, like, kill a bunch of human beings.
Yeah, it worked great, I thought. And it didn't have the same problem as the Ico future scenes. Because by this point, although we haven't spent much time with him in the future, we've been with Malcolm for this whole journey. And we even, leading up to this point, we got a decent amount of flashback. So it was a mini sort of future set story that starts in 2025 and leads up to this moment. Yeah, I thought it was great. So they work on Kokoro for a while, and then finally they have to put in the final ingredient. Okay, now you've mentioned there's some confusing things in the show. Here's another moment where I'm like, I'm not quite clear on what happened. Yeah. So they need the neural chip, the Terminator CPU. He takes it out of Misaki's head, and you're like, oh, she's like sacrificing her life. Like he's taking out the chip that makes her work. And then he puts it into Kokoro. Cut. Misaki's like, hello, I am here to serve you. Because she's still functioning without that CPU.
Yeah, so it's like for some reason it took away her memories, but like memory also isn't on a CPU. Like CPU is what makes the thing run. Do you have an explanation, or we?
No, this was at first my assumption is okay. He took out the Terminator CPU and then put in like a inferior processor, something that doesn't work as well, but can still make her some degree of sentience. But clearly, by the time we meet her at the start of the series, she is just as sentient as anybody else. So
Yeah.
one possible explanation. Okay, when they're saying CPU, it's like shorthand. This chip is a lot more than a CPU. It is like a brain. And so maybe, okay, so he took it away, gave it to Kokoro. Now it has all the, well, I guess it didn't even have her memories, or it would have already known all this.
Yeah, so like, why did her memories disappear? I mean, whatever. Look, we don't know what is a Terminator CPU.
Yeah, I came
knows?
up with some pseudoscience to explain this all. Okay, anyway, so she made the great sacrifice of not remembering her horrible future and gets to start over. And then Kokoro wakes up. And Kokoro chooses the name Kokoro because it means heart, mind, and spirit. Robots love names that mean three things. And Dan, from now on, I would like to be known as Podcast. Actually, there was a kid in, this harkens back to, it was very reminiscent of Ghostbusters Afterlife. There was a kid who went by the name Podcast. So anyway, Kokoro is the conceptual unification of heart, mind, and spirit. She exists as these three separate entities. Every time Malcolm is talking to her, you see these like three floating people that are different colors. Like green, blue, and red, I think.
Yeah, did we notice that before she started saying this idea?
Yeah, they were like that the whole series. Back in the present, 1997, Malcolm is ready. I'm going to make my case for humanity now. It's going to really blow your mind, Kokoro. I don't know. I mean, you download all the data in the world. I don't know how you're not getting it already, but I got something for you. But I need you to kidnap my children and bring them here. But remember, one of those children is in possession of the Terminator. No, the Terminator is in possession of one of those children, Kenta. Kenta wakes up, and I'm all over the place. All right, the Terminator has Kenta. He brings him to Malcolm's office, and he's like, I have your son, all right? Malcolm already knows what's going on. I know that you're going to try and torture Kenta, my child, and use it as leverage to get me to let you reprogram Kokoro. But I want you to know, no matter what, I am not opening this door.
Can I finish this recap?
Go ahead.
All right, so he gives this dramatic speech. No matter what, I need you to know, I'm not opening this door. I'm going to let my son die. Boom, 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 gunshots. End of episode. Next episode, repeats the speech. I'm not opening this door. Opens door.
Yeah, well, and it turns out he was shooting at nothing. He was shooting at the wall.
But he... And then he just opens the...
All right, I think I have an explanation, kind of. And maybe he was trying to shoot at the door, and he's like, look, the Terminator is like, I know it's not going to work, but let me just try shooting the door and see if that opens it. Or make Malcolm think I killed his son. But if I did, then I no longer have any leverage. So I don't really know. He might have just been annoyed. I'm just going to start shooting.
No. But even after the shooting, we actually then hear the kid scream because then the Terminator starts to torture the kid. It's when the kid starts screaming that Malcolm opens the door. But that's literally after Malcolm just said, I'm not going to open this door. I'm going to let the kid die.
Right. Well, and he tortures him by holding his arm. And he's like,
Yeah, that also, I heard the screaming, and then you see what he's doing, and you're like, oh. Like, I thought he was torturing him.
Yeah. I'm telling you, it hurts to... Actually, I do pull-ups all the time. I'm going to try hanging by... I'm going to go to the gym today, hang by one arm. You're just going to hear like,
But why? They end the last episode with the speech. He's going to let his son die, basically, and then he just opens the door anyway.
Yeah, it was one of those cheating kind of cliffhangers where you hear the gunshot. But wait, before we go to that, I like the ending to episode 7. Like, it was pretty intense because Kenta asks him, he's like, Dad, are you going to open the door? And then Malcolm starts giving his speech, and he's like, I've wanted a great future for the three of you. It's all I've ever wanted. And before he says it, Kenta can tell he's not going to open the door. And so he's already kind of crying by the time Malcolm says, like, no matter what, I am not opening this door. So very intense moment. Great end to the episode. And then Daniel already explained episode 8. Can We'll come back to that in a second, because episode 8 does not open with that. It opens with Kokoro as the Inos approaching the rest of them. Misaki, which, by the way, my Google Docs kept auto-correcting that to Mikasa, which was really throwing me off.
That's from Attack on Titan.
And I also saw people drawing parallels between... I saw one reviewer that was very snarkily recapping the series, and they were referring to Kenta, and they were like, at this point, we might as well call him Eren.
I hate snark. I feel like even when we criticize things, I don't think we're snarky. Was my like pseudo recap snarky? Maybe it was a little snarky.
It was a moment of snark, but I thought that was fine.
Like, I like criticism and jokes. I don't like snark. Snark is too holier than thou.
You know what? On another topic, I was going to save this for our Gladiator episode, but I saw this, I won't even call it the publication, but I was reading a well-known publication, and they were talking about Gladiator 2. And they, like, mentioning Gladiator, they were like, yes, there was a movie called Gladiator that had a very muddy story and an underwhelming finale. I think it won some awards or something. Anyway, let's talk about Gladiator 2. And I'm like, shut up.
What are they trying to say? First of all, also, the story was not muddy. Like, it was a very clear... It's back when movies had just, like, straightforward stories that were, like, very clear. Yeah. And it won a lot of awards. Did it win Best Picture?
It won. I know it won. It's a Gladiator Academy Awards.
Film criticism though, like written film criticism, is one of those.
It won 5.
Yeah,
Best Picture, Best Actor, a bunch of other stuff too.
Like, Gladiator was awesome. Like, just...
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I haven't watched it in years. So maybe I'll watch
it. I rewatched it a few weeks ago. Loved it. Still loved it.
We're going to get to the podcast, though. I'm going to disagree. I'll be like, muddy story. I think it won some awards or something.
Do you remember? This reminds me of a podcast we did like a year or two ago where, oh my God, I forget the movie we had just seen. But I had ChatGPT create a bunch of fake reviews of the movie. I had you guess whether the review was real or fake, and you couldn't get it.
I think it was Oppenheimer.
It was Oppenheimer, yeah.
We were making fun of how some critics will just try to be very elegant with their words, and you're like, you're burying what you're saying under so many layers of just long words. Well, anyway, so Kokoro, again, controlling the Inos, goes up to Misaki, Aiko, Hiro, and Raika, and is like, come with me if you want to live. Like, she doesn't say that, but she's like, come with me to Malcolm. He has this crazy moment that he's going to do. And this is what you were complaining about before. So the Terminator is outside the door with Kenta. He's torturing him. I've never seen torture like this before. And then Malcolm opens the door. And he assures, but the reason he opened the door is because it's too late anyway. And that's what he tells the Terminator. It doesn't matter what you do at this point. You cannot get control of Kokoro.
So then what?
The only way this works is if in the last 8 seconds, something happened with Kokoro that makes it too late. Or Malcolm heard his kid screaming and was like, I need to put on my best performance right now. Like, worthy enough if I was in Gladiator to win an Oscar for Best Actor. And I need to convince him, this Terminator, that it's too late to change Kokoro. Once he says that, the Terminator looks at Kenta. And this is one thing I enjoyed in the series. Well, there's a lot of things I enjoyed. This is one of the things. Anytime it cuts to the Terminator POV with the red screen and all the text, I kept pausing to read everything it said. So here, he looks at Kenta and a new mission initiates. And this is what we talked about earlier. So he was here to take control of Kokoro. Okay, now it's apparently too late for that. Instead, plan B. And this is where he's going to try and take Kenta downstairs to activate the EMP. Get to that shortly. So Misaki and the other ones arrive, run into the Terminator, and we get a little one-on-one fight between Misaki, who now knows she's a robot, and the Terminator. It's a great moment where they punch each other, and you see the metal of their arms like hitting each other. Very cool. Misaki almost gets crushed by debris. Kenta runs over to help before he almost gets crushed in the debris, but the Terminator stops the rubble. What? He saves Kenta's life. It's part of that new mission they're going to find out about shortly. Upstairs, We're getting to that perfect moment. Malcolm tells Kokoro, it's time to finally see everything as I see it. So Misaki loses her fight against the Terminator, but Aiko manages to blow him up. Doesn't kill him, it slows him down a little bit, and then does the classic thing where by the end of Terminator 1, he had almost no skin left. He was just a walking endoskeleton, not an exoskeleton. Great moment of violence where Aiko, she's like walking around with her machine gun, and the Terminator grabs her hand and squeezes it until it pops. Isn't that awesome?
That's cool.
He's about to strike a killing blow until Malcolm runs in and stops him, gets himself mortally wounded, trying to save Aiko, and he does save her. So he's laying there bleeding out, but meanwhile the Terminator takes Kenta away, and he tells Kenta, your father left you to die. Everyone left you to die. Returning to them is death for you, or you could come with me. Why would I do that? You have another future. Timothy Olyphant voices the Terminator. Doesn't get a whole lot to do in the series, but when he speaks, I think he does a great job. And I also love at this point, he has no lips, so he just opens his mouth and you hear his voice, which I think is a better choice than if you do the classic skeleton thing, where it's just like its mouth is opening and closing for no reason while it talks. So Terminator's got some other future for Kenta. We go back to Malcolm dying on the floor with Misaki, Aiko, Hiro, and Reika all sitting around him. As he dies, he has a few last things to say. Tells the kids, you're all going to do great things. Wait, have you seen that? Because you're from the future? No, but I know it. Kokoro, do you understand yet? And then he turns to Aiko and he says, hello, mother. She's his mom? And we see a quick flash for a second where in the future you see Aiko with a child with a metal arm. Very confusing because we saw now how she loses her hand, right? It gets popped by the Terminator. So that would imply that she has a child in like this version of the future where she lost her arm and then she has Malcolm. That's confusing because she goes back in time in 2022. She gives birth in 2025. So in this timeline, it would seem she doesn't have Malcolm because she left before she would have done that. I don't know, unless this is a flash forward and this is like a new version of the timeline where she has a child and she has a metallic arm. It gets very confusing. We won't dwell on it. So Aiko is like, she's just as confused as we are because she's like, wait a minute. If you know what's going to happen, you know I'm going to have a kid. Does that mean this is a time loop? We're just stuck in this circle, repeating everything over and over? And then he says, no. No one, someone told him something once. A very wise person told him, no one knows what will happen, child. That is the effing point. There is no such thing as fate. There is no such thing as fate. This is almost word for word what the prophet told Aiko before sending her back in time. You know, she told her nobody knows what will happen and specifically said that is the effing point. And then he essentially tells her, like, look, there's no set path. You don't have a particular mission other than to look after your grandchildren. You're a wonderful warrior. Do the best you can, basically. There's a lot of confusing stuff if you think about the paradox of he seems very certain that she's going to have him. She's like, when am I going to have kids? You'll get around to it. How? When? The answers will come when they should. When he says that, it sounds like a time loop because it sounds like he has this knowledge of how things are going to go in the future. At the same time, you could read it as just a general thing. Like, look, the answers will come when they should. Meaning, in life, you shouldn't know what's going to happen. You're just going to experience it. Or, the twist is, yes, there's no time loop. But, in my old timeline, this all happened. And then I went to a new universe. It's like you were saying about the iterations. You can have time travel within one iteration. We can leave it there, though. I think we're just going to twist ourselves into a pretzel. He also says to Misaki, I know you have many unanswered questions. I'm sorry, the path will present itself. Everything you need is in your mind. Now, again, you can read that as a general, like, look, trust your mind, like, do what you think is right. But you could also read it as a very specific, like, there's always money in the banana stand.
banana stand.
Like there's something in that chip that you don't know about.
But she doesn't have the chip anymore.
She doesn't have the chip.
There's nothing in there. There's nothing in her head anymore.
I mean, we need a season 2. It's not renewed for.
Is there going to be? Okay.
It's not renewed yet. But Mattson Tomlin has said that he could see this going 5 or 6 seasons. I mean, he has it all planned out. I feel like if there's a second season, there are more twists to come that will reframe some of what we've experienced so far. Okay, so Malcolm essentially quoting the prophet implies that he's worked with the prophet and he knows the prophet. Who is the prophet? It's a time travel show, so you assume that she's someone who's been through a lot of this stuff before.
Reika.
That's what everyone thinks. Okay. I mean, basically, it's got to be somebody we've met already, or else there's no interesting twist to come. So it's essentially got to be either Aiko herself or Reika.
Oh, it could be Aiko. Yeah.
Yeah. Most people have landed on it's probably Reika. I tend to agree. I think it's probably Reika. Okay, so
Kenta. We got to talk through the Kenta thing.
Yeah. Wait. Did we get to Kokoro change? Oh no. Okay. So Malcolm's not dead yet. He's a lot of final words. He's still going. Okay. Put Malcolm on pause. Let's go over to Kenta. The Terminator brings him to an EMP. Activating that EMP will kill Kokoro, but of course it will also kill the Terminator. So he can't turn it on himself because that would be self-terminating, as established at the end of Terminator 2. Terminators cannot self-terminate. So Kenta has to be the one to activate the EMP.
Weird
take
rule.
Down. Yeah, no, they really should get rid of that rule.
Yeah, very
it made for a great emotional payoff in Terminator 2, but it doesn't really make sense because if you send a Terminator into enemy territory and then it's like...
You want it to self-terminate if something happens.
Yeah, especially when you find out in Terminator 3, the thing which powers them is effectively a nuclear bomb. So, like, you have a Terminator walk into the enemy camp and then blow it up, but they can't do that. But I guess, okay, let's step back for a second. In the future where Skynet's there, I bet Skynet could blow them up. But it just doesn't give Terminators themselves the choice. It doesn't give them choice anyway. It doesn't make any sense. So the Terminator, at this point, because the Terminator can't control Kokoro, it's on plan B, which is destroy it. But yeah, can't self-terminate, can't activate the EMP, needs Kenta to do it. Why would I do that? Terminator says, the man who sent me back in time said you would. Who? You, 25 years from now. Apparently in the future, Kenta brokers an alliance between mankind and Skynet, the first of its kind, in hopes of mutual salvation. Kenta accuses the Terminator of lying. Terminator says, either I'm lying or Kokoro will kill you to protect herself. Choose. So Kenta has to make a choice. It's a good moment. I like the whole sequence. Would have landed better, I think, if we spent more of the show in Kenta's point of view and like further developed him as a character. But solid, I thought.
My issue too, like I just, he's debating whether to turn on the EMP or not, and it's like, I guess I just didn't understand the stakes. Like I didn't really understand what's going to happen in either scenario, and maybe that's the point. Like he doesn't know, but like it made it very anticlimactic for me, where I was confused. Like the tension for me was just confusion. Like I wasn't sure. Like, so should he destroy Kokoro or not? Like I don't know. Like
what it comes down to, and Kokoro will clarify this shortly, is Kokoro's pitch is you keep me online, I'm going to help protect you. Skynet sent nuclear bombs here and I protected you. You take me offline, the next time Skynet bombs you, I can't stop it. So you're probably all going to die. Terminator's pitch is you're supposed to destroy Kokoro. I guess that's the deal we brokered in the future. So do that and we can broker peace in like 2040, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's the choice.
Okay, but at this point, Kokoro's also acting all like nice suddenly.
Wait.
After...
One more thing too.
Okay.
Okay. What's the time limit on this? The time limit is that Kokoro might just go and kill Kenta to protect herself in case he sets off the EMP.
But the robots wait. But Kokoro ends
that
up
was
waiting.
before. Yeah, that was a surprise twist for the Terminator.
Yeah. So Kokoro sort of gives Kenta the choice.
Yes.
Kokoro says, like, you decide if you want to trust me or not. So Kokoro went through some change here, right? Because of something Malcolm did.
Okay, let's get to that now, okay? This is the perfect moment that we've been waiting for. Malcolm's dying words. Malcolm tells Misaki to protect the children, and he says, take them to another time. And he does the same movement that the Prophet was doing whenever she indicated a new timeline. So it sounds like he's saying, like, go to the time machine, abandon this crappy timeline, and go to a new one. And then finally, his dying words. Kokoro, I believe we can work together. Man, machine. I believe we can all be at peace. My family makes me believe in a future of peace. Do you believe, Kokoro? Do you see what I see? And as he dies, the three separate Kokoro entities come together to form one, a golden entity. Okay? So I think we all understand what happened there. All right, here's my theory. Okay? Because it does seem like basically he sacrificed himself for a future he's never going to see. Like, he's able to die at peace knowing that his children are going to go and have a bright future, and he helped to make that happen. That's very difficult for a machine to understand. It's the same logic as, why are you going to go fight for a separate timeline that has nothing to do with you, for people you've never met? Of course, Kokoro would have seen examples of that throughout history, examples of that in art, and all the data she downloaded. But she is sentient. She has feelings like a person. And words and data feed into your mind, but they don't feed into your heart or your spirit necessarily. So this moment, those things maybe she read about, heard about, she actually got to see and feel. She actually got to, this person that she was been connected with. So when he dies, it has meaning for her. She actually feels it. So I think it's taking a truth that she's probably read about, and actually she feels it, and that changes her. And that's when she integrates her heart, mind, and spirit. Because for a human being, those things don't exist as three separate entities where you can just turn one off and turn the other on at the same time. If you could, maybe Malcolm wouldn't have gone and sacrificed himself, but your spirit and your heart guide you to do that. So she appreciates that that's what human beings are, this complicated mix of all of them. And she really likes that. And she decides she wants to be like that. And so finally these three entities combine into one. So now Kokoro is just as messy and led by spirit and heart as humans are. I think.
Yeah, and it's ambiguous. So we don't, but like, she's a messy human being basically, and we don't know what she's gonna do. We don't know if she's gonna spare humanity or not. Right? We don't know. Like, and even if she wants to help humanity, we don't know if she can, because Skynet's still there. Right? We're left with this mess, and we don't know what's gonna happen.
Right. So the Terminator warned Kenta, like, hey, turn on that EMP, and if you don't, those Enos are going to be here any second, and they're going to kill you. Great sequence, great scene where all the Enos are rushing down the hall toward the EMP. The Terminator goes out there to block them as long as he can, but eventually they break into the room, they destroy the Terminator. That great shot of that little ball rolling across the floor. I'm like, I don't even know what that is.
The eyeball.
It's his eyeball, but like, why is it actually? I don't know. It was cool. Yeah. Kenta puts his hand on the switch. He has to choose. But this time, Kokoro makes her pitch. She admits to Kenta, look, I'm not human, but I would like to be like humans. Your father has shown me the worst of your kind is no different than the worst of mine. Malcolm has also shown me your best. I like the best of you. It makes me want to try to be the best of my kind as well. She trusted Malcolm. He asked her to trust Kenta. And now she is asking Kenta to trust her. It's like the transitive property. It's the only way forward for all of us, human and machine. If you detonate that EMP, I cannot protect you from Skynet and their next attack, but I'm going to let you choose. Kenta chooses not to detonate. Rejoins his family. Misaki, Aiko, and the kids head underground to safety. Kenta is kind of hesitant to join them. You get the idea that there's another timeline where he did shut down the EMP. Maybe that estranges him from his family. They disagree with that choice. But in here, you see he's not sure what to do next. Maybe he's going to walk away, go off on his own, go rogue. But Misaki reminds him, look, I don't know what's coming, but I do know that your brother and sister need you. So he goes with them. And we get some final narration from Aiko. When I went back in time, I knew I was trying to change the future. No, you knew that you weren't trying to change. The whole point was that you were creating a new timeline. So, already, Aiko. Now, for the first time, we're staring into the abyss unknown. We're unmoored. Who knows what will happen from here? In a sea of uncertainty, only one thing is clear. Things will get worse before they get better. And that's where the season ends. And possibly that's where the series ends. We gave our overall thoughts at the beginning of this. Daniel, now 2 hours later, having talked through it all, where do you end up? How did you feel at the end of this episode? Give me some closing thoughts.
I think a lot of it does not hold up to scrutiny very well, or maybe there will need to be more scrutiny. But that's how I felt while watching it too. I think much like Gladiator, there's a bit of a muddy storyline. I would say it's the same way I felt about the Batman, which was loved the vibe, loved being in it, but there was like a lot about it that I thought was bad. But like, I'm really glad it exists. I would gladly watch another season. I'd be really excited to watch one because I love being in this world, and I like the characters enough to like enjoy the ride.
Yeah, no, I agree with all the above. I think it would have benefited from more time, which I think is asking a lot. I think that was never going to happen. And I think if you slowed down the pace, you would have got to the end of the season and not enough would have happened. So I can see why that's tough to do. But I think more time developing these characters, especially Kenta, considering he plays such an important role in the finale. And it seems like he's set up, if there were future seasons, to play a bigger role going forward. And then some more polish with some of the dialogue and just making sure it all holds up to scrutiny, like you said. But great mood piece, great vibes. And I would say most of the emotional moments, they do work. Where the dialogue is lackluster and the development doesn't quite get you there, it's like the animation, the music, and the acting, it pushes it over the line. And like we said, it's a low bar, but it's definitely the best thing since Terminator 2. But I wouldn't say it's like, and I'm not counting video games. So I think a lot of people will say Terminator Resistance, which I did recap, by the way. Put a card, point at the little card spot. I'll put a card up there for Terminator Resistance video game storyline recap. But I want to make it clear, I'm not saying it like just etches past Terminator Salvation. Like, I think it's significantly better than Salvation, Genesis, and Dark Fate. I don't know that I would say it's way better than T3. I think the third one was okay, but I do think it's better. So that's where we land. I hope we get more seasons. I think we should find... I'm not sure how long Netflix usually takes to announce this stuff. But I also know there's been a lot of disappointments lately where they won't bring certain shows back. So I'm a little nervous about that. If another season doesn't happen, what can we look forward to in the Terminator world? James Cameron, in various interviews, has hinted, he has said outright he's working on something Terminator. He's developing something. It sounds like it's too early to say with certainty it's going to happen, but that's one of the few things that could get me excited about another Terminator movie. If you tell me James Cameron is genuinely involved and not like they're just borrowing his name, I mean, every movie has done this. Like when McG was working on Salvation, he was like, James Cameron saw an early cut. He loved it. And then in some interview, James Cameron's like, I saw it. Let's just leave it at that. Happens every time. Might have been a little bit more involved in Dark Fate, but if you tell me if he's really involved, like actually involved, that would get me interested. But what about us, Daniel? What's the plan going forward? So we are trying to do this regularly.
We're trying.
Well, we're going to do this regularly. Reviewing a different movie or show. This is why I say try. We're going to do it weekly for a time. I could see a reality where it has to become every other week. But one way or another, it's going to happen regularly. At the moment, I'm going to cross-post it. It's on both the main OneTake channel and on the OneTake podcast channel, just because we've gotten some followers over on that podcast channel, and I would hate for this to come out and them not even know it exists. But we're going to do that for a time, and I'm going to tell you now, move over to the main channel. We made them 2 separate channels at first. It seems like that's what everyone does when they start a podcast. It goes on a separate channel. But YouTube themselves is saying over and over, podcasts, if they're for the same audience, they should go on the same channel. They're getting better at creating tools to manage podcasts. So we're trying to consolidate. So if you're on the OneTake podcast channel, I'll put a link. Go over to the main channel. That's where the stuff will get posted going forward.
And I mean, if you enjoyed this, please leave a comment. It's a lot of work to do the podcast, and some encouragement really helps. And then also, if each of you just get 1,000 of your friends to subscribe and listen.
If that happens, then I'll guarantee we'll do it weekly. None of this bi-weekly nonsense. All right, with that, Daniel, let's wrap it up. So I'll just end by saying, there is no fate. There is no fate. That's the effing point.